Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our, although user fees counts, pretty much our first meeting of our budget for 2018. I was thinking we will reserve overall comments on the budget if anyone has any until final budget day, so we can get right into it. So Councillor Gazzola, I see you in the queue.
I have a question to ask before we start the whole process.
Certainly.
This is basically a finance committee meeting, and all year we have finance committee meetings and we take votes so that people know how council sit on various items, and then those votes are ratified within a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And I'm wondering if we're going to be able to do the same thing today at this budget meeting, if we're going to take votes on various topics to see how council stands on various issues. And then if we have a meeting, we're asking the public to come to a meeting, they will have an opportunity to know how council is leaning. If they don't know how council is leaning, is there any great value for them to come out and make their points known? So my question is basically, and I've asked this every year, but I'm sure we'll change our mind this year, that are we going to have a vote on the various topics that we discussed today? Or are we going to just sit here and gab all day and not really accomplish anything? So I guess the question is of the chair.
It's a question, okay, the chair. So what I will do actually is, historically, as the chair, I've said, my strong preference is that we do not take any motions today. The only motions we typically take is if there's a request from a member of council that is overly onerous on staff to be able to complete in time for budget. The rationale behind that, there's two reasons. The first reason is that it makes for much more efficient meeting, because we deal with everything on final budget day. The other big reason is because we don't, oftentimes there are questions, issue papers requested, and we don't have all of the information, and many of us don't feel comfortable taking a position at this early stage. So my strong preference would be that we do not take motions during the day with respect to the budget, as we have in past years. But Councillor Gazzola, if you so wish, I would take a motion to your effect if you want to vote on it.
Yeah, I would move that, as we do in all committee meetings, that we do have votes at the end of each important section. I mean, you put the argument forth that we may not have all the information. It's no different at a committee meeting. We don't always have all the information, and we request additional information. We still go ahead and put our position on the table, and the same goes for today. So I don't, and when you talk about efficiency, well, a dictatorship is probably the most efficient type of government that we could have, but that's not good. It takes, maybe we have to be a little inefficient and take a little more time.
Okay.
So I'll make that recommendation, and I'd ask for a recorded vote on it.
Okay, we don't need a seconder in committee. Sorry, Councillor Ioannidis? No, we don't need to write this down. I think it's pretty straightforward. So I don't see anyone in the queue to comment. So the motion is that we take individual motions on specific items, I'm assuming with respect to water rates, gas rates, everything that's in our operating budget today. Past practice has been that we do not. And Mayor Verbenovich, I see in the queue.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and I guess I will speak briefly to the motion. I think we've had an established practice that has worked quite well at the city in terms of our budget from year to year. I'm very pleased with where staff have come in today, and so I think there's lots of opportunity over the course of the day for members of council to articulate if they want and be reflective both on the tape and in the minutes as to their particular position on individual items if they want to take it. I think the reality has been that a budget is a complex piece of work that is months in the making and requires a fine balancing of the various expense centers, our capital budget, and how all of these individual things, as well as our rates, ultimately end up impacting on the citizens that we serve. And so I think it's prudent on our part to look at these individual pieces and to ultimately deal with the final budget on final budget day. That's what it's for. I don't think anybody's expecting us to come forward and see a significant increase from what staff have proposed. There may be some opportunities to make some adjustments. We'll see how that goes over the course of this week and next week, and ultimately final budget day. But I will support your suggestion in proceeding as we have in the past.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zoller. In the queue again. Okay, one last word since your motion. Go ahead.
No, I just want to make a quick statement on tape. We can find out what's gone on by going to the tape and the minutes. The minutes virtually tell you nothing. I spent the last week or so trying to get information from the minutes. The minutes are pretty sterile. So you have to go to the tapes, and you have to have a lot of free time. Now, mind you, as you'll hear later in the day, I've referred to the old tapes. It's really some interesting comments. But so I don't. That's not a place to find out how people stand on certain issues. And the fact that we seem to be satisfied where we're at, and it's doubtful that we can make any improvements. We can always improve on where we stand. So I don't think those are valid reasons for not having open, transparent discussion and standing up, putting ourselves on the line as to where we're at.
Okay, and just two quick things on that, if I may. Number one, we absolutely will be 100% transparent in our final votes, and I would encourage any members of committee, if they're uncertain with any particular aspect in the past, I've made it fairly clear which way I was leaning on individual items. And just with respect to the minutes, just for clarity's sake, the printed minutes aren't supposed to have much detail. The idea was that the recorded minutes are the ones that hold all of that extra commentary. So that is an expected thing. Councillor Fernandez?
Just a quick request then. I'd like to see that any motions that come forward today, whether it's related to some extra work that we might be asking staff to do, that all of those votes be recorded votes, so that at least that will be reflected in the minutes.
Okay, and again, you're sort of highlighting part of the efficiency item, but yes, we actually I would take that secondary, because if we end up voting on everything today, council or committee, may want to take a different direction, because if we're voting on every single item and it's a recorded vote, it would add significant time to the day as well. So if you want to hold off on that pending the outcome of the first vote, I would appreciate it, just because, well, actually I'd take them separately at any rate. So
it's fine if you take them separately, but I'll make a quick comment that
certainly.
I was not aware that the process and the decision-making of this council or any council should ever be governed by timeframes. Open and transparent discussion needs to be exactly that, and the opportunity for all to have their voices heard. And I know that we're already governed by our 5 minutes times 2, and that has seemingly worked quite well in the last number of years. I still think that it's important for us to not always be worried about the clock. Our staff work very, very hard on this budget and spend long hours. And so we need to do the respectful thing and give them the time that they deserve on this budget and the due diligence on this budget. So I'm happy to take that as a separate motion. I'll vote accordingly. Thank you.
Certainly. Mayor Rabinovich?
Thank you again, Chair Davey, and I apologize that I have to speak again, but I'm really getting concerned about the tone that some members of council are choosing to take. Yet again, I'm not surprised. This council continuously operates in a very open and transparent manner, and to suggest anything otherwise is a disservice to every single person sitting around this horseshoe and to the people that we represent. We have an obligation to deal with this budget, and we will deal with this budget. And there'll be lots of opportunity for everyone to provide whatever input they want to, put ideas on the table that they want to, and for people to vote on the issues as we follow the process that has been outlined. And ultimately, if it's changed today, we'll deal with that. But I think to suggest anything other than that this is an open and transparent process, that's doing a disservice to our staff.
Thank you. I won't add to that, only to say that one very critical part of our job is to run efficient and effective meetings, and I will not ever apologize for that or back away from it. It's part of what we do. Otherwise, we would waste far too much time. And let's not forget, wasting time on our side is, yes, we're salaried. In many cases, we're wasting staff time who probably have better things to do, like running the city. Councillor Marsh.
As somebody who has not had the benefit of being involved at City Council for more than just this term, I just want to add a comment that I feel it's important to listen to our colleagues today and see what direction they seem to be going without feeling the pressure to vote one way or another, because there's more information to be found. If any of our colleagues, including myself, have a different direction than what is suggested in this recommended budget, then I very much appreciate the opportunity afterwards to ask more questions, discuss it a little bit further if there's any need for clarification. And I will give a heads up that if, as in the last couple of years, we receive last-minute proposed changes that are drastically different from the proposed budget on final budget day, then I will be unable to support those changes without the benefit of thinking about them. So if any of our colleagues have drastically different directions to take us, then I would invite them to give us a heads up ahead of time, through email or through discussion, but I don't want to have to vote on them today.
Okay, with that, we'll take the vote. We'll first be voting on, Councillor Cazzola's motion to vote on the various issues in the operating budget today. Those in favor? And opposed? Motion fails. We'll now take the follow-up motion. Any remaining motions that do come up today, and I don't expect there will be a lot, but any motions that do come up today will be on a recorded vote as moved by Councillor Fernandez, and the recorded vote was asked for as a recorded vote as well. Oh, sorry, I missed because Councillor Singh was missing. Councillor Innes, did you fail to vote on that? A failure to vote is a vote in the negative. Yeah. A failure to vote is a vote in the negative, so he didn't support the motion. Okay, the voting is now open for on whether any remaining motions will be recorded or not. Has everyone voted? Those in favor? And opposed? And the motion carries. I did neglect to mention, actually, Councillor Singh is away somewhat unexpectedly. He did send his regrets, but he did not send any material concerns related to the operating budget. With that, we will get, again, we'll get right into it, and I believe our CAO, Mr. Chapman, is going to kick it off.
Good morning, Chair Davey and members of Council. I'm pleased to present the introduction to the 2018 operating budget. I'll be making some brief comments, briefer than what I've made in prior years, to kick off the presentation, and then Mr. Haggie will walk you through the balance of the content. So before you on the screen and in your packages is the table of contents for today's discussion, and as noted, it follows a similar format to prior years. So I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the tremendous amount of work that has been done to bring forward what is, in my view, a very strong 2008 operating budget. As you know, the budget process of the City of Kitchener is a thorough and comprehensive one that begins very early in the new year. It's a rigorous process, but one that serves us well in being able to present to you today a budget that reflects your direction, allows us to meet citizen needs, and advance new programs and services in an affordable and sustainable way. I firmly believe that we have one of the finest, if not the finest, financial planning teams within the province and perhaps the country, and so I'd like to extend my thanks to them for their excellent work in preparing the budget. Also to the corporate leadership team, management staff, and administrative support across the city for their excellent work in preparing the budget that sits before you today. Once again, staff are proposing a tax rate increase that is at the rate of inflation. And I think this is a point that is worth repeating and underscoring. It positions us uniquely within the province, and it's no small feat when you consider how the 2018 budget process unfolded. We started the year with a target and with a plan, and over the course of our budget development, costs went up as the inflation rate went down. And that created an increasing gap as we progressed through the process that we had to close, and we were successful in closing. Some of those increased costs were for things like the new minimum wage increase, which is a substantial impact on the budget, also the increase in the Humane Society contract, and as noted, the inflation rate consistently fell throughout the process of developing the budget. But we have closed the gap. And within these increases, we're able to maintain funding for existing programs and services, while also investing some new resources for parts of the city that people value most, things like parks, trails, neighborhoods, and of course, core infrastructure. Overall, it's a budget that we're proud to present today because it's a budget that allows us to continue to achieve the city's vision of building an innovative, caring, and vibrant city in an affordable and sustainable manner. We genuinely look forward to your discussion, your deliberations, and your decisions over the course of today's meeting and the meetings that follow. And as we have in the past, we'll track your direction throughout the meeting today and summarize it at the end for the purpose of a resolution. And just on that point, and in light of the previous conversation, typically the way the meetings have unfolded is that Council has requested follow-up items, not voted on those through the course of the meeting. We've summarized them and then come back at the end of the meeting for a vote on all of the items. And at that point, based on the direction that was just passed, that would be a recorded vote, either line by line or for groups of items. So this closes my comments. Chair Davey, if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to take them, but otherwise Mr. Haggie will walk you through the balance of the slide deck this morning.
I do not see anyone in the queue. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Thank you. Mr. Haggie.
Good morning, Chair Davey and members of Council. I'll be taking the balance of the presentation with input from others as specific questions come up. We'll begin with the general overview. Today we're here talking about the operating budget. As has been alluded to, next week we'll be here talking about the capital budget, followed by public input in mid-January and budget approval on January 22nd. The City informs citizens about the budget in a variety of ways. This includes written articles in Your Kitchener, information posted on the City's website. We produce infographics, budget and brief brochures, and budget videos. On the slide before you, we've got a lot of different ways that citizens are able to connect with the City budget process, and we look forward to getting input on that budget process through these and other venues. As noted in the staff report, there are 3 highlights to the 2018 operating budget. Over the course of the next few slides, I'll deal with each of them in turn. The first is affordability and sustainability, something Mr. Chapman's already talked to. Affordability has been acknowledged in terms of both the tax rate and the utility rate increases. The proposed tax rate increase is 1.7%, which is the year-to-date CPI inflation figure, and the proposed utility rates, combined increase of 6.5%, is the lowest sustainable option that Council discussed during the Water Infrastructure Program review earlier this year in September. Sustainability has been supported because the projected future rate increases for both the tax rate and utility rates are consistent with the rate increases being proposed this year. So that means that we're not deferring problems into future years in the budget, and that we've actually got a sustainable budget over the long term. Second is the investment in infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, we often think of the capital budget, as that's where most of the infrastructure is built and rehabilitated. But it's important to realize a connection between good maintenance, which is funded through the operating budget, and capital rehabilitation or replacement. The 2018 operating budget includes new funding to better maintain existing city assets, which help preserve city infrastructure and maintain existing service level. Some of the examples of that are included on the slide shown here. The third and final highlight is creating community. The proposed budget maintains funding for existing programs and services that the community enjoys, but also makes some strategic investments in areas that are important to the community. The new resources will help deliver parks and trails projects in a more timely basis, will help neighborhoods see change in their own part of the city, and improve cycling facilities all across the city. This slide summarizes the impact on the average homeowner as far as finances are concerned. The overall increase, including all taxes and utilities, is $73, or about 2.4%. The final slides in this section deal with our budget process and timeline, which has already been alluded to a few times this morning. Preparing the budget does take months to deliver. You can see that we start here in March and then get a final budget approved in January. During this time, the budget undergoes rigorous review from divisional staff, my financial planning team, the corporate leadership team, and ultimately council through the public budget process. When preparing the budget, the corporate leadership team sets division-specific budget targets. These budget targets require restraint, so increases are only permitted in a very limited number of cost types, things like compensation and utilities. This means that most budget lines are not provided with any kind of increase, and that's been the case my whole time here at the city. This is my 8th budget, and in that time, many lines within the budget have not seen an increase. This puts a significant onus on divisions to be more efficient and find savings in other budget lines, or generate more revenue if they need to boost a budget line that was not given an increase through budget targets. That closes that section, Mr. Chair. I don't know if there are any questions before we turn to the boards.
There are a few in the queue. Before we go to the boards, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I would like you to refer back to Schedule 045. And I've had some ongoing discussion with staff, utility staff, on the reduction that is being shown for gas service for the next 12 months. My arguments have been that the rate is remaining flat. There is no reduction to our consumers. As a matter of fact, when this was discussed at council, I had recommended a minor change in the supply portion over which we have no control. And we have huge savings in that account that really belong to our customers, that I felt we could give them a slight return. And had we gone through with that, there would have been a slight reduction in gas fees for the next 12 months. But as we stand now, that did not pass, and the gas rates are flat. Okay, nothing wrong with that. That's very good, but that's not a 2% reduction.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, if you mind asking, I recall you asking that question, I believe it was at council. I assume staff replied to that concern?
Yes, well, I've had an ongoing number of discussions with staff back and forth, and they obviously don't agree with my position, and I will not stop. I'm contending that there is no reduction, and we're advertising it as a reduction. We're showing it here as a reduction. It isn't, so let's be upfront with it.
Okay.
If I'm correct, I've been wrong before.
Thank you. I think we need some clarity from staff on that before going forward. The simple assertion is that the reduction before us is not accurate. Could staff comment on that?
Through the chair, I would suggest that, sorry, Gas is going to be here this afternoon, so we could have a more fulsome discussion this afternoon.
Okay, that's fine. We'll pause that one for now, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Yeski.
Yeah, in regards to page 40, connecting with the public on the budget, you got different means of doing it. I'm just curious that we, as council, scrutinize the budget quite closely. I'm just wondering whether you've had any feedback from the public through those means on the budget, and which means have been more used than others. I've heard nothing from the public from my ward.
Sure. So through the chair, as of right now, we have not received feedback, but that's typical of the process. Quite often what happens is we make these items available now, but they wait until there's press coverage, until the discussions happen at council, and then we get most of our input between the end of November and early January.
And as I recall, past practice, you summarize that information and provide it in the public input package for that evening.
Correct. So when we have public input night, January 15th, I'll summarize all the feedback we've received as of that point in time, and that gets in the final budget package as well.
Very good. There is no one else in the queue, so we'll move along to boards, starting with the KPL.
Sure. So I'll make a few brief comments about KPL, and then Ms. Chevreau was asked to come and make a few comments as well. So essentially, the information you have in the budget package shows that KPL has had a 2% increase to their from the city. Their budget, as you'll see on the number slide, is fairly consistent to what they had in 2017, and the projected actuals at the end of 2017 are essentially bang on target. So.
Good.
Thank you, Ryan.
Good morning.
Chair Davey of Council, I want to thank you, first of all, very much for your consideration of our 2018 budget proposal. And I wanted just to take this opportunity, because I have a captive audience with you now, to talk a little bit about our achievements from 2017 and what we're looking forward to for 2020. I know I'm on the clock. First of all, I'd like to give you an update. Through our new strategic plan that we developed in 2017, we're able to really align our programs and services to broaden our reach through new initiatives, including community partnerships, such as a new library service at the Grand River Cancer Centre, which has proven to be very successful. It's new, and we're looking forward to that partnership. St. John's Soup Kitchen, the Working Centre, senior residents, and all the higher ed institutions. We have seen an increase in 34%, this is year to year, from September to September, 34% in our social media engagement. We actually have tracked that. We know where the social media hits are coming from. We always for Facebook and Twitter. We expanded to Instagram and Snapchat. Twitter and Instagram have taken off unbelievably this year, and we're really happy with those numbers. Usage of the Studio Centre workstations. As you know, we are going to embark on an expansion for our Studio Central or for a digital media lab. We have made small changes without the funding to enhance our programming. And with those small changes, the Studio workstation activity is up 72% since last year. Overall wireless usage has increased 30%. And our technology, software, and social media support requests are up 37%. We're really pleased with these numbers, and I'm particularly proud of the staff who've been able to do this with the same, basically, staffing components that they've had year after year. We're really thrilled with our collaborative programming, and it's a win for everyone. I just want to give one example, which is our partnership with Center in the Square, which has allowed us to bring singer-songwriters. They always have to have a book, so they have to be authors as well. So that combination to our 85 Queen series. An example is our Hawksley Workman event from a couple of weeks ago. We had 600 people interested in the event. We could only take 200 at so many minutes, and we had a fabulous event at Central. Of course, we have 150 musical instruments now that we can lend to our community. That's through the Sun Life Financial Partnership, who funded that project. All of those instruments went out within 48 hours. With our interim report, they're so impressed with our numbers that they've just given us another 50 instruments, so now 200 instruments. And then finally, I wanted to let council know that our new card registration, so these are new members of our library, is up 20%, which is an unheard of number for public libraries in this day and age. So we're really thrilled with that, and I think it's a testament that we're hitting the right notes in terms of programming and services and that outreach and engagement with our community. So finally, we can't do it without our talented and dedicated staff, quality and relevant resources, and a clean and physical environment. So I thank you all for your continued support for the Kitchener Public Library. Thank you.
Thank you. Are a couple questions. Councillor Gazzola.
I asked my annual question on provincial grants. I see they haven't changed. They've been like this forever. Is there any push on behalf of your organizations, and you must have provincial organizations? Is there, and we're looking at an election year. I understand sitting government have bags full of money to give around. Is there a move to try to make the provincial grants a little more realistic?
It's a great question. There is, in fact, a movement within Ontario Public Libraries to try and change that provincial formula. There's the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries, and we have been lobbying to try and change that. We are actually hoping that this election year might actually help us with this. So stay tuned, and you can see me again next year, and maybe there'll be a change. You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, Mary, for the good news about the music program. I think that's wonderful. Did I understand you correctly? You said the increase in new card holders up 20%?
20%.
And that's across to every branch?
Correct.
That's significant. And do you also track sort of the walk-ins, the number of people? Have you seen an increase in the number of people coming into the libraries as well?
The walk-ins have also gone up, particularly at Central. We're seeing a significant increase. I don't have them with me right now, but there's a significant increase. And we're seeing not only an increase in the people, but these are people who have never used the library before. So they are being drawn to the library because of the type of interesting and innovative programming that we're offering that they hadn't thought of as being available in the library. So absolutely.
So are you seeing auxiliary uses because they may come for a program, but then they stay for other, take out books, take out music, take out videos, those kind of things?
Correct. So every time somebody comes into our space or uses any of our products, we always take that as an opportunity to talk about some of the other things that might be of interest to that person. So we always try to make sure that they leave that space with more information and to come back for something else.
Yeah, I know. I go in for one book and come out with 3 plus audios, so I get that. I'm pleased to see that. I mean, I certainly noticed a substantial increase at the Central Library, and I'm usually there once a week. So that's really good news.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rabinovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add my thanks and to you and the team for those kinds of number of successes that you've seen. I think over the last few years we've been opening up the library a whole set of new ideas, and as you pointed out, that no doubt is impacting those participation numbers. I remember when we were talking about building the expanded central library, one of the rationales was that in other cities that had made that kind of investment, they were seeing significant increases over a period of time in terms of usage. And I know there were some who were skeptical about that, but certainly I think our experience now only adds to that statistical sampling that is seeing the library used in new and creative ways. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
There's no one else in the queue. I'd echo the sentiments from fellow members of council here. I'm actually astounded by that 20% figure. That's fantastic news and shows the real need and desire in the community for the services that the library provides. So thank you very much. Congratulations on the growth, and I personally have no issue come final budget day approving your budget as is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, up next we have the Centre in the Square. And I will direct your attention, there is an issue paper on this, 0101.
Sure. So I'm just going to introduce Mr. Gordon. He wants to make comments on behalf of Centre in the Square.
Very good. Morning,
Chair Davies, councillors, thank you. I'll try and be very brief. You've all seen the numbers. Consultation with the city, we have inflated the base amount, same amount the city uses, reduced the transition amount by an equivalent number of dollars. I wanted to do two things on top of that. Number one, the community-focused mandate was passed in 2015. I want to congratulate management and staff of Centre in the Square on very effectively managing through this transition, and is not done yet. Secondly, point out to council that on the 16 operating budget that you saw, management brought it in a slight surplus, which was shared with the city. In 17, we're on this track. We're heading towards a slight surplus. Be glad to try and answer any questions.
Thank you. Just hopefully to jump one question. So again, just a reminder to committee that any surplus the Square has, half of their surplus is returned to the city. So at the moment, that's going to be just over $46,000. So half of that would be back to the city, assuming that their final numbers are in line with that. Questions, Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, actually, that was the first question you've already answered. And by the way, congratulations on where you're at. It's good to see you come in the black, and there's things have operated very, very nicely for the last couple of years. You've changed your format somewhat, and it seems to be working well. I'm just curious I'm concerned about going down the road. I mean, right now you need $2 million a year from the city. Where do you see that 2 or 3, 4 years road? Are you looking for that increase by some amounts?
That's a difficult question to answer. So far, the Centre in the Square management and staff have managed to stay within that budget, even though electricity amounts have gone up. We've had 2 union wage settlements, etc. 4 years from now, I don't know. My guess would be we're going to get to that $2 million, and then there will be discussions with the city.
Good. Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
Yeah, I think my question's along the same line. We've given you some transitional funding for the last couple of years. How many more years do you project that you're going to require the transitional funding?
Do you want to take? No. The management has been able to effectively change programming to see what the community responds to, where we get better attendance, where we get better financial results. It's still a process. Children's programming has been going well. Some have gone very well, some haven't. As we go through that process, the winners and losers have been offsetting. Will they continue to? We would hope there will be more winners and losers as we determine what the community supports. That would affect the future budgeting. It is our goal to stay within that we talked about, Councillor Gazzola's question about $2 million. Does that answer your question?
I think it partially does. I guess the answer really is you don't know, because you're trying to change your programming. But I'm just wondering, what is the percentage of increase that we have given over the last 3 years? So it's been substantial.
Over the last 2 years?
Well, 2 years, 3 years, yeah.
Go ahead.
Can you state that question again?
I'm just wondering what percentage of increase in your operating budget we've given you over the last 2-3 years.
For the operating budget side, and in consideration with the transition fee, originally, we're finding getting used to a new relationship with the symphony, so the transition fee was helpful in the sense of where we were falling with weekends, which is the primary programming time. But we found now that the transition fee is a very helpful tool, financial tool for us in the sense of being able to program better and be able to find those relationships within the community, like with KPL and other organizations. So it offsets a lot of the programming that's not really programming. It's, in a sense, more the relationship stuff. We're also looking at where we're trying to meet the mandate that came through and how we interpret that and how we go forward with it. So the transition fee, as it slowly shrinks, is an important piece. Where we fall in 4 years from now, I'm hoping that we're still within a $2 million range, but water, sewer, gas, hydro having a greater effect on our operating capabilities. And again, in 2 or 3 years, we'll be at the table again with 2 bargaining agreements. I really couldn't say where we would be at least 3 or 4 years down the road.
So I don't think my question's yet been answered. I'm trying to get at what is the percentage increase that we have given. I don't know if Mr. Hagee has an answer to that, a percentage increase over the last 2 years.
Mr. Hagee?
So through the chair, over the last, the total dollars given to Centre in the Square in the last 2 years it's been $2 million, including the transitional funding. Prior to that, I believe the funding from the city was around $1.4 million. So there was a substantial jump from 1.4 to $2 million, and then this is the third year in a row that the city of Centre in the Square $2 million.
Yeah, so just as an update to all the members of the committee, so when you see that on page 049, when you see the increase of 2%, it's not actually costing the city of Kitchener 2% more. We're reducing that transitional funding by that 2% as well. So there hasn't been more money going to the Centre in the Square, correct me if I'm wrong, from an operating standpoint for the last, since we did that, had them in 2016. And eventually what will happen is if Centre in the Square ultimately does not need, or sorry, continues to need that funding, that the figure that's now down to 182,000. That I believe that began at 250,000. So that will continue to be whittled down by that 2% inflationary increase until it's wiped out, which will probably only take 4 or 5 years. Follow?
Sure. I think so.
Oh, sorry, I don't mind your time.
I wasn't sure. No, I'm not worried about that. I guess just a quick comment, I'm concerned from the perspective that I understood we were giving you to your transitional funding, and that I'm not hearing that there's an end in sight for some of that. And so that's concerning to me because the rate in which we're giving you increases is higher than anywhere else. And I know that other places could use some of that funding. We also heard from KPL, and there's. So I'm just concerned that I'm not hearing that there's an end to this transitional funding, and that we're giving a lot more than the rate of inflation on a year-to-year basis. So it's just where I'm coming from.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Yaneski?
Yeah, thank you. Senator Square is a 37-year-old building, and I guess when you get to that stage, it needs maintenance quite a bit, and having sat on the board back a few years ago, I can understand things start to break out, wear out, get outdated, etc., and they need to be replaced. If you didn't get any funding from the city at all, absolutely nothing, would the center be in very dire straits and have to close down?
The center would be in dire straits, yes. Closed down if not. Part of the March 2005 agreement with the city is the city and the Center and Square management would sit down, and the city would be responsible for the envelope building, so the roof and the windows and the doors. Capital. Center and the Square will be responsible for the capital inside the building. So the sound system, the lighting, stage, all of that. Both sides jointly have worked through a 10-year look ahead to determine, on average, when do things start to fail, whether it's heat, air conditioning, roof, or whether it's lighting, sound systems, etc. We know approximately what we're facing in the next 10 years, and for the Center and the Square to generate enough surplus to cover its part of the capital is something we're working on now. It's going to be difficult, but we're working on it. The reserve fund, that each ticket has a certain amount in it. We always need a certain base for emergencies. If something happens and a show is canceled and we have to refund tickets, or something breaks on the stage or in the lighting. Not predicting any of those things happening before we hit the end of their useful lifetime. Right. So we think we have line of sight on it. Do we have all the granular details? No.
Okay. I appreciate that answer. And I'm aware of that agreement and those arrangements. It's just a matter of, you got to work through them. Discussions had taken place over the last couple of years or so in regards to the KW Symphony and them rescheduling their programming to make weekends more available for other attractions to come in, which are more money generated than the KWS. KWS programming for the upcoming season or this season. Next season's not out yet, but is that already taken place? Is that still needs another year before that all kicks in? Because I know the transition period, because they take a couple of years because they've got their conductors, the guest artists, etc., already booked years in advance. So are they still changing some of those dates, or has that already been worked out? Help me out on that.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, through the chair. We basically worked out an agreement where they still keep 16 Fridays and 16 Saturdays. And we moved into a position where we have better availability to the calendar in a sense of it's not every weekend for X amount of weekends, it's every other weekend that allows us to now try program through that space and time. So they still take 16 Fridays and Saturdays. So the shift became, instead of 2 weekends in a row, and then a blank, and then another weekend, and a blank, then 2 weekends, it became every other weekend, except around Christmas or in November as well. But for the most part, they've compressed the season, but in short strokes, hasn't really happened, but we've moved the calendar around so that it helps us try and find the touring Broadway that can sit down for 8 days and so on and so forth. But it really hasn't happened. So we're shortfalling on weekends, and we're just trying to get a little more imaginative as to how we create other types of programming, hence our relationships with KPL and others.
Okay, thank you. And my final question comes down to when I look at the that chart on the screen. you got the revenue from Kitchener and then other revenue. Is there any support or funding provided from the provincial or federal governments? I know sometimes there's a grant. Could you help that?
We just received a huge grant from Canada 150 and matched by the city, and Canadian Cultural Money matched by the city. And we do apply for provincial grants. They're a few and far between, but we do apply with every chance we get. We have an application before, I believe it's the federal government, for a lighting board, and we're waiting on that. But we do apply, and we get a lot of no on the provincial side, and but we did get quite a bit of attention with the federal side.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your work. Good luck in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
I had a question. I just want to make a comment. I am very supportive of where the Center in the Square has come and where it's going. I mean, for the record, they have received $2 million 2016, 2017, and I guess the issue paper here is asking that we carry on with that $2 million. I'm totally in favor of that. I think they have come along. They have, for many, many years, they were underfunded, and they're finally got to the position where they are receiving their I feel, appropriate amount of funding. The reason I ask the question is that there is no doubt in my mind going down the road that we're going to have to give them additional support. They have to meet the rising inflation like all of our other local departments. So I think they've done exceedingly well in the last in changing their mandate and making things work. And I just want to be on record of totally supporting where they've been and where they're going. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rabinovich.
Thank you, and I too wanted to express my thanks to Bruce and the team for the work they've done over the last few years. I think we have come a long way into where we've been. There's obviously work that continues to need to be done, but I know the staff team is continually working both with their partners here in the community as well as their partners up and down the fund that are in the theater business to see how we can partner better together and ultimately improve the financial numbers overall. But like I say, we have come a long way, and it wouldn't have been without the leadership of the three people there. So and the team. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yaneski. Go ahead and ask a question.
Yeah, a question to staff on the similar thing, and the response I got on the grants that you get from the provincial government or federal Canada 150 grant program. Why isn't some of those grants that come into thousands of dollars, whatever the amount is, shown in as revenue in the on that page?
Mr.
The capital budget, the Center in the Square, is different than the operating budget. Would be the short answer.
So it would be reflected
in the capital part of the audited financial statements.
That's true. I just mind memory blank there. Thank you.
Just to add, Mr. Chair, typically that funding isn't known, so you often will not actually see it in the capital budget because we don't know that we're going to get that funding until after we've applied. Right. So essentially the funding that you do see in the capital budget will be leveraged to apply for that capital grant, and we will know. So if it's in 2018, Center in the Square will get some money, and they will use that to apply for a grant in 2018. So you likely will not see grant funding at all in there, but it is used. The funding you do see is used to apply for grant funding.
Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, just a quick question on the community development, and I'm wondering if this is related to the studio at the one side. Have you seen an increase in the use of that by the community, and is that the expense that we're seeing on this line?
Studio, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're seeing, we're growing those relationships and actually reestablish some of those relationships, but the studio is here. Our lounge is busier, and we're trying to get the main theater a lot busier, but there is a lot lot of dates that some of the community users and others would like to use, but the availability of Fridays and Saturdays, that's not on a long weekend, are few and far between. And with larger promoters holding those other dates, it's hard to help that out. But the studio does become busier. The kids programming and other programming we do, we're finding that not-for-profits and charitable organizations are using our lounge more and doing things there. So we have opened the doors. We're getting a lot of traction and a lot more, establishing a lot more relationships. We never had a relationship with the library before. Now we do. We moved into working with other organizations like Waterloo Region Family Networking and other organizations like that. So yes, there is a lot more traction and a lot more established relationships using the facility.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, there is no one else in the queue to speak. I'll just add my final 2 cents. I'm very comfortable with where the center and the square is. Yes, there was a big increase in funding, I guess 3 or so years back. But from that point, the last 2 budgets, and including this one, the 3rd budget in a row, the net impact to the city has been flat. There hasn't been an increase at all. In fact, I believe there was a surplus last year, and there's projecting a surplus this year, so they are returning some funding. So as long as, again, we're not seeing that impact coming to the city, and when I look at the chart before us and I see things like our revenue at the center is up almost $200,000, we can see that things are going in the right direction. So more than happy to support the center and the school's budget, operating budget when it comes to time, as is. Thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Marsh, do you have a quick comment?
Just something you said just made me want to add 2 cents. I'll thank you for all the work that you're doing, but I just want to remind council that as Councillor Gazzola pointed, we found out that the Center and Square was underfunded before, and that's why we had such a major increase, and it was due to well-researched, external who came and told us this information, and so it's not like we're just pulling a number out of the sky, and I think that's important to recognize. So I would just encourage you to continue to think outside the box and continue in the direction you're going, and to seek more patrons to come from outside of the city commissioner who to really showcase what an amazing facility we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kylie. Okay, moving on here then, sorry, Gal, we see that comment.
I just have one more comment in light of what I'm hearing. I just wanted to say that for me, I'm trying to understand when and if the transitional funding will end, because it was called transitional funding for a reason, and it was only supposed to for 2 years, and now we're going on 3 years. So it's not that I'm not supportive of the programming or where you're going, and I understand where you're going. It's just I understand, too, what you were saying, Councillor Davey, that 2% is kind of being taken away, but still, we've given them a much larger than 2% increase now for the 3rd year in a row, and I'm just wondering if an end. And maybe the answer is no, but that's something I would like to hear or see and ask us for. We need for 6 years. You've asked for 2 and now it's 3. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, is it going to end or is it not? And when you finally get your 2% increases and you meet that $2 million, how long is that? Is that another 5 years, 6 years? And so I'm trying to gather, and does that mean you're not going to ask for any more funding moving forward? So I think for me, there's just still a lot of questions. It's not that I don't support what you're doing or the connections that you made or the partnerships that you're doing or that you're moving the center and the square forward. I can appreciate that. I guess I have still some questions to understand exactly the fulsome details of the next few years for the center and the square. Okay,
so Councillor Galusiak, I'm assuming then that you'll want the center or the staff to follow up on the answers to some of those questions. I can answer the first one in terms of when the transitional funding, making some assumptions, assuming that the inflationary increase stays at 2%, the transitional funding will be gone in about 4 years, maybe 5 years, because eaten up by that inflationary increase, which would, on the flip side, would mean that the funding remains flat for the next 4 or 5 years. But
I think signaling that intent is something that's important for us to understand, because I was under the impression it was 2 years, and now here's 3, and then when's 4. So I guess just kind of having that longer term vision, it doesn't have to be answered today, but something that if you can bring back, sorry, it was going to be a question, if you can bring back, and it's not even necessary for this budget cycle, but moving forward, I think that would be important for me to understand.
Mr. Gordon, do you want to comment?
If I may, Chair Davies, my memory starts to fade. I'm mature and experienced, as Mayor Verbenovich has heard before. That's my euphemism for old. I believe the transition funding was 3 to 5 years in the original motion, not 2. Okay. It is our intent that it goes away when the base amount inflates to $2 million. That's about where we think it has to end up.
Okay, thank you. That was maybe the question I was trying to get at earlier, and I wasn't getting that answer.
I misunderstood your question. I apologize.
No worries, no worries. Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Mr. Hagee, bring us along.
Next, we'll move into the tax-supported operating budget. And as we consider this, we'll look at the 2 themes of affordability and sustainability, 2 concepts that are often in tension. And as we've discussed through prior budget processes, Council's made some substantial progress on both fronts over this term of Council. Regarding affordability, the City takes direction about it from the strategic plan. In order to do so, we consider how Kitchener stacks up against other municipalities. We consider inflation both from the consumer side of things and from the City point of view. And perhaps importantly, we look at the balance between service level expectations and the willingness to pay by citizens. Each of these factors will be considered over the following slides. First is a comparison to other municipalities. And the graph on screen, which Council has seen several times before, depicts the relative tax burden of the same bungalow property in each of Ontario's largest municipalities. Kitchener continues to be one of the most affordable Ontario municipalities in which to live, and is well below the provincial average. So you can see Kitchener's position is 6th lowest, indicated in the orange. You can see Cambridge just to our left in a green bar, Waterloo a bit to the right in a green bar, and the provincial average in the yellow bar on screen. Given Cambridge's proposed 28 tax rate increase of nearly 6%, and Waterloo's proposed increase being considered today of 2.1%, Kitchener's proposed increase of 1.7% is the most affordable in all the regional cities. Again, staying within the region and comparing ourselves with other municipalities, the table on the screen now shows all municipal costs and taxes and utilities in each of the cities within the region. I'll draw your attention to the bottom line. That shows total cost, and you can see that once again, the City of Kitchener has the lowest overall cost of services provided by the cities within the region. Moving on to inflation, we'll consider that, as I mentioned, from the consumer point of view, or CPI, and the municipal point of view, or MPI. Year-to-date, CPI inflation in Ontario is 1.7%, while MPI inflation is 2%. And that just means that the inflation factors on the city are a little higher than on the average consumer. As staff will continue to track inflation over up until final budget day, but we believe the final number of 1.7 is a strong probability, as we already have 10 months of data, and we'll only have 1 or possibly 2 more before final budget day. Looking at inflation and tax rates over the longer term, you can see the graph that shows over the past 10 years, the city's tax rate increase, including EDIF, the Economic Development Investment Fund, has followed MPI, which are the top 2 lines. Over that same time frame, the base tax rate increase, which excludes EDIF, has followed CPI inflation, which are the bottom 2 lines. In other words, without EDIF, the budget was inflationary. Investment in EDIF increased the budget impact to be closer to the MPI range over the past 10 years. A final slide about inflation in comparison to the tax rate, and the one that may be most valued by Council is the one shown on screen. And this shows the tax rate increase over this term of council versus inflation over this term of council. Again, this graph shows that if council approved the proposed tax rate increase for 2018, result in a cumulative tax rate increase that is below the rate of CPI inflation. The final consideration for affordability is resident attitudes towards taxes and service levels. Through previous budget cycles and the last community survey conducted by Environics, the city has received consistent feedback. The majority of residents prefer maintaining existing services at a tax rate increase around the rate of inflation. This feedback is consistent with what we've heard through previous community surveys. It will be tested once more as we go out for a community survey early in 2018. Looking to sustainability, we can consider sustainability being defined as a budget that is balanced and is able to support approved service levels over the long term. The table on this slide shows that the overall tax support operating budget is sustainable, but there's a fairly fine line between the city ending the year in a surplus position or a deficit position. For 2014, 13, and previous years before that, the city ended the year in deficit positions. Then in 2015 and 2016, the city ended the year in surplus positions and was able to put funding into the Tax Stabilization Fund. For 2017, the last projection by staff was a deficit of about $500,000, which will be a draw on the Tax Stabilization Reserve Fund. So just to summarize, affordability and sustainability in the tax-supported operating budget, Kitchener is starting from a relatively strong point of view. We have some of the most affordable taxes within the region, within the province, and we have a sustainable budget, but one that is, has a fine line between ending the year in a surplus position or a deficit position. As we continue on in the slide deck, we'll talk some specifics about this budget. The first is what a 1% change is. So 1% to the net tax levy is about $1.1 million. And to the average homeowner, that would be a change of about $11 on their tax bill. Looking at assessment growth represents new tax revenue generated by additional development within the city. For the 2018 budget, you can see assessment projection is 1.55%. And looking at the graph, that's fairly consistent with what we've been seeing over the last number of years. Since the budget package is finalized, we've been notified that there's some additional growth to that, which is not uncommon, and that the final figure for this year is probably closer to 1.6% as opposed to 1.55%, and that translates to roughly $50,000 in additional revenue. We'll have a final turned roll for final budget day, and so that additional revenue is something Council will consider as part of final budget day.
Okay, Mr. Hegg, I think I'll pause you there. I have a few people in the queue.
Sure.
Starting with Councillor Gazzola.
I'd like to go back to Schedule 056. In that schedule, when you go to the next page, 057, you talk about different assessed values depending on which community we're in. On this page here, 056, what is the what assessed value are we looking at? Are we really comparing apples to apples?
So through the chair, the two slides are not meant to compare exactly the same thing. Slide 56 is if you take that exact same home and put it in each of the municipalities, what the taxes would be.
It's the exact same home,
correct,
but won't have exactly the same assessment.
Correct.
So it's...
And it wouldn't have the same tax rate as well, because as you move from municipality to municipality, the tax rate would change. But this one is meant to show that if you had the same home in any of those municipalities, what would you pay? And in Kitchener, you would pay less than most other large cities in Ontario.
Can you tell me what the taxpayers of Kitchener benefit from our ownership of natural gas, of a natural gas company?
The financial impact is it's $13 or $14 million is the dividend paid by the gas utility to the tax base. And some of that goes to, some of it goes to capital.
Well, is there not, in addition to the 14 million, is there not some that goes to, is there not 14 million that goes to operating and 7 million also goes to capital?
No, it's 14 million in total.
So if you equate that, what does that equal to?
Around 13%.
Okay, 13 percentage points.
Yes.
If that were included here, what would that do?
Well, obviously we moved to the right. I don't know how much.
Well, okay. It's a point, nothing wrong with it. But just a point that, I often ask for a little asterisk because we're the only municipality there other than Kingston, and Kingston is a very minor issue, but we're the only municipality of all those municipalities that has a substantial break there. I just want to give our gas customers a thank you, that's all. Another question I was wondering about, and you sort of answered it, in going as you've gone here, what assessment growth rate have you used?
1.55.
You have used 1.55?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Now, just referring to schedule on 57, where do these figures come from? Basically, Kitchener and Cambridge are the same, but you're telling me that if my house is in my house, a similar house in Waterloo has a market value of 25% more.
So through the chair, no, that's what I pointed out. 56 is the same house in each municipality. 57, the chart is just the straight up average assessed value for Kitchener, the average assessed value for Waterloo, and the average assessed value for Cambridge. So it is not saying it's taking the same house, it's just taking total assessment and divide by the number of residential properties.
I thought the purpose of the schedule was to equate. I guess I don't understand that, and I'll have to study that a little more because I don't quite understand the comparison. Because it does, by using that figure, you get quite a substantial difference in the taxes. So that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Yeah, some of the questions were answered through Councillor Gazzola, but I guess the one question I have is with the Environic study, when do you think is that going to be coming out? Because that's an important thing that we need to look at.
The chair, I asked Ms. Major about that. She thought it was likely in spring 2018.
Spring 2018, okay, thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I want to just ask about the slide that's on the screen. With the utilities costs, are we assuming a certain number of residents living in that home? And would we be able to see how the costs would differ if it was, a couple different scenarios? So, for example, a single individual versus a family of 4?
Through the chair, yes, we can model a whole bunch of different scenarios. We are using a consistent benchmark for each of the utilities, and that's consistent across the region. So specifically for the water sewer one, I believe the value is 204 cubic meters, or maybe it's 210 cubic meters, and that's agreed on by the various municipalities. So there's a user group of water and sewer people, and that's the average that they would say is kind of the normal house. If we restated that for 100 cubic meters or 300 cubic meters, the values would adjust, but that's just the agreed upon average. Likewise, as we go through, stormwater is just the medium. If you had the average medium residential house, what would you pay for stormwater? Hydro is a standard amount of kilowatt hours, and natural gas, I believe, is 2,100 cubic meters. We can model a whole bunch of different things. The purpose slide is just to show the average house in each of those municipalities. What would their burden be?
I understand the purpose. I think just for the benefit of people to look at our budget and understand how it's going to impact them, I think it would be more illuminating to see, property taxes are going to not vary depending on how many people live in a home versus a single income, let's say, pensioner is going to have a different water use and potentially even, and certainly hydro and perhaps even gas compared to a larger family. And so it just would, and we're not even I realize we've already decided on those rates, but just for the purpose of communicating to residents, it would be useful.
Okay.
Councillor Yaneski?
Going back to page 56. Yeah, on that chart, you've got Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo. You've indicated that our proposed tax increase intended is 1.7, Waterloo's 2.1,
correct,
and Cambridge 6%. Assuming that's what's approved, just as an assumption, would the Cambridge one, based on how close we are together, move over to the right for next year? With that 6% increase, possibly?
It's possible. We'd have to wait for BMA to produce the graph, because they do a bit more than just add 6% or 1.7. They actually look at what the value of the average bungalow home is in each of the municipalities and adjust that over time.
Okay, so it's a little more involved than just straight 6%.
Correct.
Okay. The other question, next page on 58. You've got the Consumers Index 1.7, Municipal Price Index 2.2, and I've noticed over the past several budgets, the municipal has always been slightly higher. Can you provide us, not today, but it's maybe an email, what the rate have increase been for both of them for the last 10 years as well as inflation, just so we can see a comparison?
We can. We have that. That's something back. So we can get that fairly easily.
For the last 10 years, yeah. When you get an email, that'll be appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had yet another discussion with some residents in my area about their perception that we were growing so much, especially in the last number of years. Why is that investment or that growth not paying for growth? The perception is that as we add more houses, we add more taxes that are coming back into the city. So can you help me explain to them, both publicly now and I'll take notes, what it is about that doesn't equal out? I mean, I gave an explanation, but I think another, maybe a newer version or updated version could help the citizens understand why we're increasing taxes possibly by 1.7, because a lot of people feel, as they see our city grow, that we should have no increase whatsoever.
Sorry, I'll just skip ahead a little bit. So on slide 66, you can see the growth-related items down at the bottom of the slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, assessment growth is contributing, growth is contributing to the bottom line, especially on the operating budget side of things. So we're getting additional assessment growth. We do have some growth-related costs, but overall, we are seeing a benefit to the operating budget because of additional assessment growth. The real problem comes in on the capital side of things, because as the city grows, we have some significant capital expenditure, and those come in big costs. And so development charges help pay for those in some way, shape, or form, but the legislation says that they don't have to pay fully for all new items. So for instance, we build a new community center, we're able to charge some of that to development charges, but the city by legislation has to pay for a portion of that. And the portion of new fees that we have to pay for quite often outstrips additional assessment growth. So I would say a bit of a legislative imbalance that causes, and that's provincial legislation, the city's choice, provincial legislation that causes growth to not pay for itself. The other thing I would say just really briefly is this is a lot bigger discussion and not just a budget thing. There are entire workshops on it. I would suggest our friends in planning would have lots to say about as well, as it's something that they deal with and struggle with quite often.
You're right, Mr. Hagee. I think it is a much more broader discussion and a much more complex discussion. Is it that we're seeing the public in general is asking for more than what we can afford to give them? So a perfect example is, they're continuously asking for more trails and sidewalk snow removal, and if the grass isn't cut in the park, they want it instead of every 3 weeks, they want it every 2 weeks. Is that where the push-pull is, or is it coming from other sources? Expectations.
So, through the chair, I would say that's part of it. So some of it is keeping existing risk levels and just putting it into the new places is one cost. Have separate costs for what you've talked about. So putting in a crushed gravel trail isn't what we want. Now we want a trail that's wider. That's improving service levels. So that's an additional cost. Changing the way we do things, the frequency of cutting grass, clearing garbage, all of those types of things, all put pressure on the tax rate for sure.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Rabinovich.
Thank you very much, and Ron, thanks for including these charts, because I do find them very helpful, both the affordability one between cities and across Ontario, and the ones across the region. And we've been using these for what, about a decade now?
My whole time here at the city.
Okay, so I think they are informative, and it's great to see. I mean, we have continually stayed on that lower end of the Ontario, of the lower end of that spectrum, and have been very competitive in the region, which is urging. My colleague, Councillor Gazzola, brought up the gas utility in terms of the affordability comparative taxes, and I'm glad that he did, because I think it is important to recognize that we are fortunate that the council of the day, maybe many decades ago, had the wisdom and the foresight to not sell off the gas utility, and in fact to keep it for this community. And as a result, it's enabled us to offer our citizens a quality of life and facilities that otherwise we wouldn't be able to afford. So I think of our, when you compare us to others in the region and others across Ontario, I mean, our network of community centres, our support of our neighbourhood associations, things that are important to our citizens and impact quality of life into the neighbourhoods they live in, are things that we've been able to do. We've also been able to come to the table as the largest city in the region and bring forward amenities like the Centre Square and the auditorium and so on, which are important to our residents, but in fact are regional services. Yes, you can have a debate about Is that our responsibility or isn't it? The reality, but we need those kinds of facilities in a community our size, and we are the largest city, and we're the one who's had the ability to bring those forward. And I think as a result, our city and our region have benefited from that. So I think it's important that we recognize that the gas utility over its many decades has provided those opportunities.
Thank you. Anyone else in the queue, Mr. Haggie, so we can continue?
Sorry, I was just thinking, so to Councillor Yaneski's point, he had asked for the CPI, MPI figures. We'll provide the dollar figures as well, but this chart shows the MPI line, which is kind of the top dotted line, the CPI line, which is the bottom dotted line. So you can just see there that over the course of the last decade, MPI has been higher than CPI, but we will still send the information you requested by email. The next graph just shows the expenditures by department, shown in a pie chart, and you can see that it roughly breaks down into thirds. 1/3 of the net expenditures come from the Community Services Department in blue, about 1/3 come from the Infrastructure Services Department, shown in red, and about 1/3 fund everything else, yellow, purple, and green sections in this pie chart. There are more details about the individual budget requests by division. That's provided starting on page 16 of today's budget package. Next is the tax levy change detail, and this shows the breakout by expense. So not by division or department, but by expense type. Base budget items, which are increases required to deliver existing services, are indicated in roughly the half of the slide. Increased base budget expenses are the first items shown here. And you can see that the major expenses in increase relate to wages and benefit costs of city staff who are delivering existing programming that's valued by citizens. There are two items in that section highlighted with a star, and there's more information about both of those on the following slide, which I'll get to shortly. The middle of the slide indicates some extraordinary items, and these are expanded on in the issue paper OP5, which is on page 109, 110 of today's budget package. And finally, at the bottom of the slide are the growth-related items that we've touched on briefly. We have additional assessment growth and a few growth-related costs. The two start items from the previous slide with debt reduction and a commitment to the Kitchener Rangers. The city has seen a reduction in its debt costs, but some of these savings are contractually obligated to the Kitchener Rangers. The debt that matured was from 2002, a renovation that happened at the Odd, and this work included a number of revenue-generating improvements, which are listed on the slide. The new revenue was used to pay for the debt costs that was issued for the renovation. That has now matured, and some of that revenue from the 2002 expansion has been directed to the Rangers and discussed through the 2012 Odd expansion business case. Looking at the 10-year rate projection, we can see that, I'll actually just draw your attention down to the bottom line. You can see the tax rate increases that we're talking about over the next decade, and you can see broadly they range between 1.5% and 2.5%. So again, this brings back full circle the discussion we had through this section about affordability and sustainability. We can see here that we're talking about affordable, reasonable tax rate increases over the next decade, and that the budget that we're talking about is sustainable. You don't see big spikes in the tax rate increase, which means that we're looking at a sustainable budget. Finally, in this section is just to point out a few issue papers that are included about the tax and operating budget, and these begin on page 102 of today's packet. I'll pause here, Mr. Chair, for questions before we move on to the next section.
Thank you, and there are some, beginning with Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have some, some questions on the extraordinary budget adjustments, but there's a paper on that gather you want to leave that till we get to the papers and we discuss them all together?
I believe we're going to deal with them all now, so we'll probably take some time at this section. So again, beginning on page, I think it's like 103, there's those issue papers. So we'll deal with everything we've dealt with from the pilot and we'll deal with the budget issue paper, the issue papers at the back as well now.
Even though you haven't gone through the budget issue papers, basically, we've come to this point, we really haven't, the staff have not talked to the,
I don't believe staff is planning to speak to each issue paper.
I'm not planning to present the issue papers. They're noted on this slide just to make sure that there's a place to pause and talk about them.
Great. So now would be the time, Councillor Gazzola, and I'll reset your time.
well, okay, I sort of left all of those to the end, thinking we would deal with them at that point, but before I go there, I have a couple of other questions. Is it possible to get a little more detail on these wages and benefit changes? How much of it is due to new staff, or how much of it is due to inflationary contract agreements, or what? Is it not possible just to get a little more detail?
So as far as the amount related to new staff, it's extremely minimal. There's some staff in one of the issue papers that are funded. So it's essentially, there's, I believe, 3 new staff being asked for on the supported side that are funded, not additional tax rate increase. The rest of it relates to agreements, job evaluations, and union contracts.
Well, that's the sort of information that would be nice to see. I looked and I see, well, overall, we're looking at 8 or more staff increases, but we'll come to that to another point.
Just through the chair, a number of those are on some of those are on the utility side, so it would not show up here.
Yeah, but they're there. We have to deal with them. Yeah.
Folders.
All right, I'll jump right into. I'm dumbfounded here when I see this. Just looking at the extraordinary budget items, and I had to go back and couldn't find anything in the minutes, so I had to go and look at the videos. And for 3-4 years, I've always been asking for an increase in investment income, and there were always a million reasons why that was not possible. Last year, we budgeted $2,150,000, and I asked that it be increased to $2,004,000, which is $250,000, and it was turned down that we would never make it. Well, we did end up making almost $2,600,000, and the final answers still aren't in. So actually my $2,004,000 was pretty conservative. Now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, we're looking at a 40% increase in investment income, or $850,000. I'm just amazed. No, Mr. Chair, last year, and you couldn't in good conscience support $250,000. I'd like to hear around the table where we stand on this $850,000. Has it just been put in to balance the books, or what's happening in our economy all of a sudden that we can put 40% increase in investment income?
Through the chair, that has changed is we've now seen rate increases for the first time in 3 or 4 years. So this year, the federal bank increased the rate by 0.25% in July, I believe it was, and then again in September. And those are the first increases that we've seen in essentially this term of council. So there is new information. We've reflected it in the budget.
You don't know that those increases are going to carry on in 2018, and this is what we're dealing with. I mean, that's a humongous increase. 40% increase. I have to have a better explanation for that.
Well, I think, and staff would follow up, but I think what staff does is they look at the projections of what's going to happen the next year, and then they also look at what happened the year previous. And I remember very clearly discussing this the last budget, and there was no indication from anyone that there was going to be these increases for the interest rates. So now it's happened, and we're reaping the benefit of it. And if we're being frank as well, if we had have increased the investment, I mean, this isn't exactly how you want to budget, but I mean, we are still forecasting a deficit. And if we had have increased that, the deficit would be increased by that amount anyway. So we still get the money at the end of the day.
I guess in my experience with staff and their projections for the last 4 to 5 years on investment, I'm doubtful of the value of staff's projections, and that's not their business. I can't blame staff. Staff do what they should be doing. The buck stops right here, and it's council that makes those decisions. And I'm questioning where council has gone, and I'm questioning where we're going. Is this something to make 2018 an election year look good, or what is it? It's quite a...
I think we know that's the case. Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, I would draw council's attention to the graph that's shown on the second page of the issue paper. I think that is worth 1,000 words and it tells the tale. From 2004 to 2008, if you look at the actuals, we were in a rising rate environment. We were conservative in terms of how we increased our budget, but you can see over those 5 years, we did increase the budget proportionate to the increase in actual rates. Consider what would have happened, though, had we increased our budget to the actual level of investment income in 2008, because we saw that our income fell from $3.5 million down to $500,000, a $3 million shortfall inside 2 years. And so you can see from 2008 through 2011, 2012, we actually had a higher budget than our actual investment income, and it caused a deficit, and we spent time in trying to close that gap. That's the reason why from 2011 until the current budget, we were concerned about being too ambitious around investment income. But Gazzola is correct. Each year we did slightly better than we had anticipated through budget. In 2018, we're looking to set the actual budget equal to the projection. And as Mr. Hague did too, the reason we're confident in doing that is because we have confidence that rates are not going to fall in the near term based on all analyst projections. That said, there is some risk, and so if council is concerned about setting the budget at the actual level of investment income, set it lower, but there will be an impact on the tax levy if you do.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. I see you've keyed out your time expired, but you can queue back in. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. I also had a question on the wages and benefits of 2.9%. So that's something that the public will see and say, well, we're increasing our taxes by 1 why are we seeing 1.2% increase higher than that on wages and benefits? And I think this is where we run into the feeling from the public that we're spending more than we are bringing in. Is there an I mean, I know that we're adding additional staff, and some of them are covered by utilities, and I've had some good conversations and emails with staff about these additional positions and understand the rationale. If we were to not support all of the new positions, would we see a change in that 2.9?
Through the chair, there would be a reduction in that line, but there would be no reduction in the bottom net tax levy. Right.
Okay. So there would only be a change in the 2.9, but not in the overall.
Correct.
Okay.
Because they're funded, they're self-funded, so there would be no change anywhere else.
If I can pause there.
Sorry, in the bottom line.
I believe Councillor Gazzola did ask for perhaps some detail on that line, and if I can just add my 2 cents, so hopefully we can close this. When I read this line as well, it does cause some concern in isolation, because it makes it look like that's the rate that there's an increase. So when staff looks at breaking that detail down somewhat, I know anecdotally, largely our freely negotiated contracts have been well under 2%, in comparison to this 2.9%. So if they could include some commentary on that as well, I would think it would help clarify why that number's much more inflated than I think it really should be. Sorry, Councillor Fernandez, you can continue.
That's fine. I put that because I think that's why I was asking the question. I think understanding the contracts that we've approved in the past, they have never reached 2.9, so we have to make sure that the public understands the difference between the two of them. The question I have is around the extraordinary budget adjustments, and that especially around the minimum wage legislation. So we're looking at $840,000 increase based on the new legislation for minimum wage. Now, at a roughly 36-hour per week, and that's, I know that staff some work longer, some work shorter, some work much, much longer, but that comes to my estimation of around 165 FTEs. Is that a correct number? Are we looking at 165 FTEs who are at minimum wage who will be increasing? And I know I've had some conversations with Mr. Goldrup on this, and given me a list of what positions we're looking at. But if I look at that list, I would be hard-pressed to believe that would be 165 people.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more complex than just the minimum wage. But Ms. Goldrup, did you like to comment?
Through the chair, Bill 148, the Fair Workplace Better Jobs Act, is at third reading now. It should receive royal assent soon, and it's going to hike the wage to $14 an hour effective January 1st, and another $1 an hour January 1st, 2019. This impacts 1,150 employees, prime employees, cleaners, parking attendants, ushers, crossing guards, student laborers, building attendants. I gave you the list, Councillor Fernandez. We've calculated the financial impact just on the wages of Bill 148 to be $770,000 a year. There's an additional cost because this legislation also introduces various leave provisions, vacant entitlement provisions, and schedules that also have a financial impact.
Okay, and I appreciate the additional information. Are you basing this $840,000 for both increases or just the 2018 increase?
Mr. Goldrup.
Through here, this is just the 2018 increase, and we'll be doing a lot more work to make sure that we have positioned ourselves competitively in 2018 before we bring to you a recommendation for 2019.
Okay, and there was the same number of people be affected by that additional. Like, I'm unfortunately, it's hard to hear through my microphone once I'm on mic. So my understanding was you said 1,100 and how many?
1,150.
1,150. Okay. Employees would be affected by this change in minimum wage.
Correct.
Okay. But I just wanted to make sure I understood, just because I can't hear this shuts off. Okay. My time is limited. I do have some other questions. I have queue.
Very good. Councillor Galway-Seelock. Pardon me?
That's okay.
Go ahead.
So we're dealing with issue papers 2 through 5 now?
Correct.
Okay. So I just had a question with regard to issue paper number 2, OP2, and with respect to the landscape architect as well as the active transportation planning project manager. And I just want an understanding, I understand that the funding is coming through existing capital budgets, But what is it taking away? For both of them, it's what amount are we discussing, and what won't we be able to do from a project perspective? Is the capital funding is now going towards staff as opposed to projects?
So through you, Chair, in terms of the funding for the landscape architect position will be out of all of the capital budget associated with parks, trails, and playgrounds. So the reality is that we've seen increased support for the delivery of these capital projects, but we haven't seen increased staffing levels to be able to implement the projects. And so in terms of meeting those demands, we'll be funding the additional landscape architect from the capital projects in all those areas. Now, what I should say is all of our existing architects, so we have currently 4 existing landscape architects, they're also funded through the same way. So their time is allocated in terms of the capital projects in which they're delivering. And so it would be the same methodology for the new landscape architect position.
Okay, but adding this position, understanding that there's a lot of work on the plate of landscape architects, does that translate into rehabbing less park, doing 2 kilometers less trail? What is year? What is? Do you have something to equate that to?
I don't have specifics in terms of what it amounts to in terms of delivery. It's approximately $100,000. We have, as part of the capital project, and I know capital program will be looking at the capital program next month, but we've identified increased funding recommendations in terms of some trails and park, the major park areas, and so in terms of delivering on those areas, that's where we'd be looking at the additional support. In addition, we know that through the neighborhood strategy and Love My Hood, that there are, in order for us to provide support to residents, we also need staffing support through the skill set of a landscape architecture. So then we would also be supporting the Love My Hood program as well.
Okay, so I have the same question then with the active transportation project manager.
Thank you. Through the chair, what the proposal here and reflected through this budget issue paper is our proposal to replace our existing active transportation student with a full-time permanent active transportation technologist. The estimated cost for 2008 is approximately $20,000 extra to pay for a full-time staff person instead of a student, and $30,000 per year thereafter, start 2019. This proposal is put forward based on the significant momentum we've gained in the active transportation field, and we want to put a little more commitment from a staff level to that entire program, with the benefit being a permanent staff person will be there in place on a permanent basis, forgive my redundancy, whereas a student, we typically, well, we've got excellent work from them to this point, we have to train them, and a lot of projects go longer than the 8 months that we hire students for, so having the 2 permanent positions in that will allow us to conduct and execute our projects more efficiently.
Okay, thank you for that information. I think some of that could have been detailed in the report, just with regards to it's only 20,000 more than currently budgeted, but thank you for that. I think that's all my questions on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Ulrich and Mr. Carmichael. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Some of this has already been done, but I just wanted to get some more information on up 5, page 110. The comment also comes up on page 2. And I wanted to ask for some more information on what staff consider reasonable risk on the funding of extraordinary items when they also find out that this is the highest budget amount in the past 10 years?
So through the chair, through an analysis of our existing investments, our regular balances, we have strong confidence that we'll be able to hit the budget that is posed. So even though it is the highest value we've had in a decade, we are confident that we'll be able to reach it.
But what is that confidence based on?
Well, based on multi-year analysis of what our investment balances have been, where the rates are today, and the fact that any of the people we deal with have not even hinted at the possibility of a decrease in 2018. So there's no signal that the interest rates are going down.
Okay. I don't share that confidence, but anyway, my next question is related to that. It's possible that on December 4th, when Council considers the whole issue of now everyone's grown cat licensing, that if that went ahead, that could mean an income of at least $200,000-300,000, possibly more. Has that been considered as part of this this op-ed, or will it be?
Mr. May, you want to start?
Through Mr. Chair, as I mentioned when this issue was debated at committee, it will likely take us about 2 years to develop and implement the program, so we wouldn't have any revenue coming in 2018. I would also say I don't know the math behind Councillor Etherington's projections, but we would have to sit down with the Humane Society and come up with a very detailed costing model. It's way too early to speculate on the numbers.
It's not too early, Mr. May, for Guelph that is doing it immediately.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe they've been doing it for some time, actually. This isn't something new that they've just started.
Well, we could disagree on that. I just think that we're ignoring a sizable chunk of income in order to pay this Humane Society increase, which I'm in difficulty with. So I look forward to that report, but I still wonder why it does not form part of this as a, in my opinion, huge way to generate more income and take less of a risk.
So through the chair, just to respond, it's not included in the budget because there's no direction from council to actually do it. So if there is a decision and it gets implemented, it could be reflected in budget, but we have not created a budget on a prospective decision by council.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I'm going to jump around a little bit. First question is regarding 0114 for Ms. McGoldrick. Just want to note this looks like a very serious problem that we have with maintenance gaps. I'm just wondering, where's this 400,000 increase going to go? Are we going to be doing? Are we not there yet?
We're only up to OP5.
Yeah, just to 5.
Phew! I was thinking we had to do all the budget issue papers right now. Okay, so let's go back to. Sorry about that.
No problem. Do you want to queue out and queue back in?
No. Okay, so on 0105, just a question about the WSIB reserve reduction of 89,000. Does that amount go, where will that amount go? Is that to the capital reserve fund? Or sorry, I guess it wouldn't be the capital. Where does that money go?
Chair, the $89,000 has been it's essentially fallen to the bottom line in the proposed budget. Okay. It's part of the 1.7.
Okay. At 0102, we looked at the landscape architect, put in And we've paid out of our operational budget some money towards temporary cracks. So will we be seeing some savings? We continue to have temporary contracts in addition to the new FTE.
Mulder?
So through you, Chair, our contracted staff, our contracted staff are paid for through the capital bit in terms of the capital program delivery. And we utilize contract staff for a number of reasons. Maybe to backfill staff that are off on leaves, for example, maternity leaves. Another reason is if we have a significant large project such as the South Kitchener District Park, we can hire contracted resources to look at the additional workload associated over the short term in terms of large capital project delivery.
Okay, so just to continue on Councillor Gallagher's questioning about what are we losing out when we take from the capital budget, are we actually losing a little bit less because the temporary contracts that were paid out of the capital budget and now we're going to be using those funds for the FTE?
So in terms of our existing contract staff, those staff have been put in place to deal with the kind of that one-time significant capital project delivery as well as a maternity leave support.
So the answer is no, then?
So no, yes,
okay.
they'll fill out their contract.
Yep, thanks. So regarding that issue paper, I have a few more questions. So the neighborhood liaison coordinator / project manager, I did have a chance to talk to Mr. May on the weekend, but I do want to ask you, Mr. May, about how are we going to prevent this additional level of staffing from adding to the red tape versus reducing it? Can you help me understand? Because I'm concerned about the neighborhood liaisons generating a lot of interest in the community to do all kinds of projects, but how are we not going to have a backlog on the other end if all we're doing is adding basically a supervisor of those people rather than adding the committee on the operations side?
Mr. May.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, I don't think it's clear enough in the issue paper. This is a management position, a non-union position. Currently, we have 4 neighborhood liaisons, each of them reporting to different supervisors. This will simply pull that team together, and they'll all report to one supervisor. So it's not an additional level of organizational structure. They have to report to a supervisor now. What we found is that they were reporting to community center supervisors who are already very busy managing or for community centers and all of the staff. And so the vision behind this particular position is that they will be dedicated to helping break down that red tape behind the scenes so that our neighborhood liaisons can spend more time out in the community moving projects forward. In addition, you heard Ms. McGoldrick tell you that part of the landscape architect position that is in this issue paper will free up additional time on her team so that these 2 individuals can work together to break down the red tape and move these projects forward. I mean, I think you only have to look at the fact that we have Festival of Neighborhoods capital grants that were awarded back in 2010 and the projects are not complete. This will give it dedicated attention to those projects forward.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. I have to click out. I'm going to queue back in with a few more questions.
Certainly. Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Chair Davey. My first question is dealing with on page 106 and 107 on OP4 with the assessment base, with the 2 positions that are going to be created. And I mean, I agree with this approach. It's a good approach, but is there not a way through our system when we input data throughout whatever the process is, when someone purchases a property and then someone applies for, that would create triggers for us that way we can maybe alleviate some of this pressure?
Ms. Evans?
So you're looking for us to, can you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, like every point whenever there's a new purchase of new property and then someone's redeveloping it or whatever, is there not trigger points in our system to like give us that heads up warning?
The information actually comes from MPAC. Once a property changes hands, we get a listing of property sales, or we get a call from an owner. So through that process, we actually update information. You were talking about assessment changes. If assessment changes, they all come through MPAC. And there have been occasions, as we mentioned in the issue paper, when MPAC can't keep up with the changes in the way that we need them. So somebody needs to be monitoring the assessment base and checking the information, checking the building information to make sure that when we have occupancy permits, we actually get those onto the assessment. And sometimes we've indicated properties are missed. The one property that I've just got information on, we have property that changed hands. It showed up as residential property, and it's a parking lot. We missed 252, that's not in this issue paper, 252,000 assessment at a higher rate because it hasn't been caught by MPAC. So and that's only a couple situations, it happens a lot.
Okay, so are we going back and reassessing these properties to get some money that we've missed?
The property I just mentioned will be on the return roll for next year. We've missed whatever it was up to this point in time. We only have, but once we became aware of it, we were dealing with it. You have a certain amount of time to make sure it's on the current roll. And in this particular case, we found out late in the year, so it'll be on next year's roll at the increased volume.
Mr. Chapman?
Just to add to Ms. Evans' response, yes, the triggers exist. Because of limited resources right now, we have to set the bar very high in terms of what. I think the whole point here is to say with 4,000 changes a year, we can lower that bar, look at a lot more properties, and more than pay for these positions by doing that.
Okay. Thanks, Trace. My other question deals with Haggie and dealing with the minimum wage, and I guess maybe if you can answer this or not, I don't know. My concern is with this increase, what is the really greater impact here? Because we're looking at these amount of workers, but now when we have other contracts up, now they're going to think that they're underpaid, and they're going to want increases. So how is this going to impact everything?
Mr. Goldrow or Mr. Haggie? Mr. Goldrow, there we go.
Through the chair, you're absolutely right, Councillor. There are other impacts upstream. We have vendor contracts who employ their workforces. Our current contracts are probably not going to be impacted, but our future contracts could well be. So, yes, you're absolutely correct that we'll see what other impacts there are.
Okay, so we're looking at a bigger impact in the future, which is unfortunate. Seems like every other level of government likes to dictate our costs to us. Anyways, and I just have one quick comment, and it's dealing with the transportation, the full-time. I fully agree with that position. I've seen in the past what part-time or a student can do to a project and some of the issues that we may have. So it's better to have someone that does it on a day-to-day basis and do the job correctly.
Mayor Rabinovich?
Thank you. I just want to, briefly touch on, we're on OP02?
Yes.
25. And just want to touch on the fact that I'm pleased in particular how these have been approached in that they don't have an impact on our operating budget. It's the creation of the FTEs that's necessary. I think all three of them to priorities of this council, our commitment to parks and trails, and the work that we're trying to do up front speaks to one of the biggest priorities we've heard, from our residents in terms of growing our active leisure facilities, and particularly in terms of the park and trail system. I think on active transportation planning, we all know the efforts that not just us, but the community is going into in terms of moving forward with our cycling master plan and those initiatives. And finally, in many ways, in my mind, the piece that knits all of this together is the role of the liaison coordinator and project manager. I think having someone who is going to help move these resident-led projects forward is extremely important. We have been very fortunate as a community to be able to count on our volunteers to assist with a great deal of initiatives in our community. And our neighborhood strategy continues to look to them. But you do need to have the coordination role and the person who's going to help them work through the systems here at City Hall. And that one, in my view, is extremely important because it also ties in, engaging citizens in things like what we're doing with Urban Trails, like what we're doing in active transportation as well. In my view, much of this is really minor administrative in nature. And the fact that the funding has been found within the existing budgets is something that I appreciate from our staff in terms of looking at these.
Everyone in the queue has already asked questions. I just have a couple. The first, again, just going back to the minimum wage impact. Do you have an idea what our neighboring municipalities are budgeting for this increase, or no? Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, my understanding is that in Cambridge the impact is fairly minimal because they had moved to a living wage previously. And in Waterloo, there was a staff report that I believe went to Waterloo Council, and we can pull numbers from that, but they're within the range of what you would expect given the numbers that are in our report today. So we'll circulate that information. It's on the public record.
Okay. Yes, I recall, Cambridge moving to that living wage impacted. In that 840,000 figure, which, I'll be frank, was a shock, does that include, obviously it doesn't just include the people at minimum wage, are we taking into account the expected impact of people moving up the chain in terms of the compression? My question, Mr. Goldrup?
We have a report that we'll be bringing to caucus on December 4th, where we want to have a deeper discussion with you about those things.
Okay, and this only is for the initial bump in the minimum wage. Do we even have an idea what the costs will be, the full costs will be when the entire minimum wage is increased to the final amount? Like, are we looking at do we have an idea of another $1 million when the final increase is coming through?
I don't think we're looking at an increase of the kind you're describing. There are other provisions in this legislation around vacation entitlement, new leaves, and equal pay for equal work, which we are going to have to study and report back on.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had, I'm not sure if I should bring it up. I'll bring it up now. I guess actually it's not a question, it's more of a request. Being that we are projecting additional assessment growth, once that is, if that is confirmed, I would request an issue paper from staff suggesting how that additional, looks like $50,000 would be allocated. I would suggest the most boring of allocations would be the WSIB challenges that we're facing, but I would ask staff to provide some recommendations so it's not left entirely in council and committee's lap. Okay. Okay, going back to the queue, we still have 3 people. After this, we will take a quick stretch break. Councillor.
Yeah, I'm going to start off by just letting everyone know where I stand. I'm not, at this point in time, I can't support any of these staff increases because I don't have enough information on them. I'm really, and unlike the mayor, when I see this as minor administrative, when we say we're finding the money in our budgets, it sort of indicates we've had too much money in our budgets if we can find this kind of money. One of my biggest concerns is I'm confused as to what is operating and what is capital. I mean, I was always of the thoughts that capital funds were not intended to fund day-to-day operations, and there's a real mix-up here as to where this money is coming from. Because then what happens when the capital funds run out? Where do we go? I guess that's a much bigger question. I will leave it. I will leave it for another thing I'm interested in is I'm really interested in, and I've asked this many times about the cycling and how has it changed? What has the impact been? I don't totally see it, but I've asked for that information. I would like to, we're going down this road, I would like to see a little more information on that.
Sorry, I missed that, Councillor Gazzola. More information on, did you say cycling?
On how much cycling is being taken up as a mode of transportation.
Okay.
For the 12 months of the year. That's the other, going now to the part-time wages. Earlier in the year, when this came out, I asked staff, and along the same lines, we have our own staff to worry about, but we also have all the services that we hire from other people. And I wondered, and I think I was told quick it will have virtually no impact on us, but I question that, and you don't have to respond. I want to use all my time. Okay, so I'm hopeful that we will get more information coming back before budget day on that whole issue of the part-time wage increase, what it breaks down, where we're going down the road. We need to have that up front so we can deal with it. I think we've really just provided with limited information. I want to move on. Okay, on the.
I'm pausing your time for just a second. I have stopped your time. Mr. Chapman, do you want to respond probably to the earlier comment?
I'll respond briefly to the 3 questions. First of all, you are correct, Councillor Gazzola. Most of our staff positions are charged to operating budgets. There are a few areas of the corporation, there are project managers that work exclusively on capital projects where their costs are covered through those capital budgets. Engineering project managers are a good example, but also the landscape architects. And to put the finest of points on the issue that Councillor Galloway-Seelock raised, there is no impact on the capital program here. When we budget a parks project, a trails project, within that budget is an allocation for project management. So we're simply saying right now that program of work has become so large that we can justify adding another project manager. Those costs are already did in the detailed project budgets for all of that work. So there is no impact on deferring or delaying other projects here. In terms of cycling, transportation staff dating the cycling master plan, I believe that will come back to council in 2018. And so we'll include an analysis of the work that's been done to date, and we'll refresh the program. And lastly, I recall the question that you asked on the impact on contracts of the increase to part-time wages. We'll ensure that either in the caucus report or as a part of our follow-up, we bring back information. I know Ms. Palmer did take a look at that under existing contracts, was not concerned at this point in time, but certainly we close that loop if it's not been closed already.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola.
Okay, I'd like to move on to this issue with MPAC. I'm quite upset with where we're heading here. I mean, MPAC's an agency that's been set up. We pay them to do what's supposed to do, and it seems to me that they're falling down. And why do we have to hire policemen to follow up on what MPAC is supposed to be doing for for the municipality.
There's always been a role for the municipality in things like vacancies. We have to make sure the properties are vacant. With the assessment, when we have SUPs and changes to the assessment throughout the year, we have a role. One challenge is the ARB process is changing, requiring people to have a law clerk designation in order to appear before the ARB. We're seeing many more ARB hearings over the current period of time. There's something pretty busy every single day, and it will only increase because there are consultants who are it's their business to make sure they appeal the assessments, and we have to spend the time to ensure that we defend those appeals.
Okay, thank you. I'm not convinced about this, and I hear where you're coming from. My issue here now, though, is this is something that affects all municipalities. It affects all the municipalities in our region, and it affects all the municipalities in our province. And so we're jumping out and recommending hiring new staff. Before we go this out, I'd like to hear what we're doing together with first the region, who have more to lose from this than we do. And then how do we deal with the other municipalities in our region? And why are we, this may well be something that we need to do down the road, but why are we not dealing with that part of it before we come to it and start hiring 1, 2, Lord knows how many staff? And this whole issue with the ARB, again, it's something that the province has handed down to us, and this is the first we're hearing from it. This is another added cost, but shouldn't we have the courtesy from the province of having some say on what is happening?
Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, I'll offer a response, and if there's more follow-up required, we can bring it back. First of all, as we noted in the issue paper, it's not the role of MPAC to represent the municipality. And at the end of the day, we find that when we do not represent ourselves at ARB hearings, we lose, because property owners are represented by expert consultants with a lot at stake. We're behind the ball on this. Cambridge, I believe, has 2 staff that fill this role currently. Guelph, I believe, has at least 2 staff. Waterloo has implemented software, and we've been getting by for many years with a retired assessor. And so our goal is to work with Cambridge, to work with Waterloo, to look at the software they've implemented, and to collaborate around this. At the end of the day, though, assessment management is a local municipality responsibility. So yes, the region does benefit, but we're responsible to manage the assessment role, and so we're taking that responsibility seriously.
Councillor Fernandez.
A quick question on WSIB. So originally we thought we would be requiring a $439,000 funding, and now it's $350,000. Correct?
Mr. Goldar.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Does that prepare us for any unexpected claims in the coming years? This is a 10-year projection, at least a 10-year projection that will cover us. Is that my understanding?
Through the chair, the amount is for our current liability. So the presumptive legislation can cover illnesses and injury that have deemed to be happened dating back to 1960. We don't know what the future liability is. This is just what that is known.
Okay, thank you. So just going to the active transportation position. So having sat on the cycling committee since I first was elected, I have to say that my first airtime really created a lot of furor at the cycling committee when I said no to some funding. So I'm going to be very cautious how I approach this. The issue paper and the response I received from Mr. Reedman talked about additional funding from different levels of government. Do we have any understanding or indication of what that might be?
Through the
Chair. So waiting for confirmation back from our Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program application that we put in. Our rough estimate is about $350,000 for the City of Kitchener, but that's based on how many people apply and everything. So that's assuming everybody applies. So I can't get exact detail at this point in time, but that's sort of our assumption based on.
So the application was for $350,000 grant? Or is that's the grant that's available and divided by however many people apply?
Through the chair, grant for all municipalities over 15,000 people is $40.5 million in Ontario.
Okay.
So for City of Kitchener, we estimate about $150,000 for next year.
Okay, so if we were to, let's just project, if we were to get that funding, would we be funding this FTE through that grant? Or what would that grant money be used towards?
Through the chair, that grant would only go towards capital dollars. It cannot go towards staff time. So we would be funding them through our TDM program.
So it would only be for capital projects. And how long could we use, like what would be the length of time we'd be able to spread that funding out for? Because that would be on top of the projects we've already got planned for the next years, right?
Through the chair, so that is funding just for next year projects. Our understanding is if this program continues into the future, we would be eligible for a similar amount every single for the next 4 years.
Okay. So, I've dealt with our students that have been working with our cycling and our active transportation and our staff, and have been excellent. I have to take umbrage with what Ionita said, because they go above and beyond their work experience, their co-op opportunities. I see them at every event. I just needed to make that comment because I don't know that Megan was, I believe, finished last week, but I want them to know that they are extremely appreciated. I've had conversations around this particular issue in the past with the administrator, our Cycling and Trails Advisory Committee. I would really like us to see, make it an attempt for next year to, and I know, Mr. Reedman, you said that having a part-time person does not fulfill the obligation, but I think this is an opportunity for us to do a slow increase in this, to start off with an additional part-time person and add in with our co-op students. We would actually have that consistency for the training of our co-op staff, our co-op students. Is that something that we could at least implement in a stepped process, with maybe the iteration of a full-time in 2019 and beyond? If we were to, I know that you said that $150,000 would be capital only, but that I'm hoping that would do some balancing within the overall budget. Plus, sorry to add more, plus we have been seeing a positive with our parking enterprise. So that was a bunch of questions because I was running out of time.
Through the chair, staff would advise against an incremental approach. We've already taken an incremental approach for the last few years using a co-op student as a stopgap where there is a need for a full-time staff member. There's a very ambitious program for cycling in TDM next year, which includes a refresh of the cycling master plan. And that's going to take a significant amount of work. And the reason why we need that as soon as possible is because we can then use funding from the OMCC, Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program, towards trails that are identified as a primary cycling route. We know that protected cycling infrastructure is what grows the infrastructure mode share. Excuse me. And until we get to that point in time and start investing in those trails because of our unique Kitchener, we really want to capitalize on that. So we would advise next year hiring a part-time student or a part-time staff member to facilitate this program.
Yeah, one quick comment. Go ahead.
So to that end, I just think that I would like to see if staff could bring forward an issue paper showing us an incremental approach, partnering a part-time staff person with a co-op student, because some of our co-op students are 8 months, versus a full-time staff person immediately. I just think that because some of that is coming up, the Cycling Master Plan review, which the Cycling and Trails Advisory Committee is very, very interested in doing. So you've got a committed group of people who are willing to take on substantial work, and I know they're only volunteers, but that's how the original Cycling Master Plan started, through volunteers. So can we at least have an issue paper with that kind of approach? Would that be possible?
Through the chair, we can bring forward an issue paper. However, based on Ken Carmichael's comment earlier, we'd like to be more for the combination of a part-time student and a part-time staff member as well as students throughout the year, and getting less work output from the combination of the two because it's less consistent.
Okay, so staff will bring forward an issue paper, but I think the point taken is staff's made their recommendation, so obviously you wouldn't expect an issue paper necessarily in favor of that position, but we can look at the information and make our decision.
Just the information, I think, would be good, important. Thanks.
Certainly. We still have 4 people in the queue. I'd ask everyone if they could keep their comments a little more brief. We've been sitting for a while. Let's see, Councillor Marsh, next in line.
Thank you. So some of my questions have already been answered. Just another question about OPO2. Just wondering about the active transportation planning project manager's role with regard to the region's work on cycling. I think that we can make the most amazing cycling master plan, but if we don't have the region on board with their grid of arterial roads that are really the most ideal places for additional cycling infrastructure, then we're not going to have an ideal plan. So I'm just wondering if staff can comment on where the region's at in terms of collaborating on the cycling master plan.
Through the chair, so just 2 Fridays ago, we actually initiated a dialogue with all of the directors from all the public works areas, from Cambridge, Waterloo, the region, and the City of Kitchener. And we spent 3 hours talking about better coordination and consistency around cycling. So the City of Kitchener has led that and we'd like to continue to push and to continue the dialogue. But based on the work program, it's difficult to do with our limited FTE resources. But it's promising because the region is looking at, moving along with us to make sure we're at the table and really pushing for that complete protected network throughout the city.
That sounds like good news to me, and I fully support this issue in terms of that role especially. And I want to know, if there are opportunities on the political side for us to push further at the region, to see the region step up to the plate. Then I welcome that and a higher level of communication about those opportunities. I want to just add that, again, with the region, they have the TravelWise program in place to encourage employees of various private businesses to promote active transportation. So I would like to make sure that we don't have duplication in this new role, so that I understand that it's in our interest to not have to build more parking infrastructure. However, I do think it's the region's role as well to encourage more active transportation. So let's just make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. Another question regarding Councillor Fernandez's question about, part-time versus full-time. If we add an FTE, does that also mean that we're not going to have students continue, or are we looking at having students into this FTE?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, we currently have 2 students in the cycling role. So one is a year-round student. That position will be replaced by an FTE. We have a summer student, which helps with the programming and the valet and all those aspects during the busy programming season. So that role would remain.
So if we have an opportunity that we see for another student position to be added again, will we do that?
Through the chair, we don't envision a role for a year-round student at this point in time, but if that were to be needed in the future with the growth of the program, we would look through our to accommodate that.
Right. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now,
sorry if I apologize just for 1 second. So hopefully, maybe that part of that could come back through the issue paper that's requested, and maybe a bit more information on how staff are rated in terms of additional students with relation to FTE positions that might be useful in the issue paper. Sorry, Councillor Marsh, please continue.
Great. I want to thank Mr. Chapman for clarifying the funding of the contract work to let us know that it's always come out of the budget, and I think that would have been helpful information to be added. So just want to comment that would be more helpful in future. Make sure that we're not worried about additional capital programs being cut in to make up for the FTE dollars. And finally, I just want to add that right now, according to Living Wage Waterloo Region, living wage for a person living in Waterloo Region is $15.42 an hour. And so I'm proud to see that, well, I mean, it's no choice. We don't have a choice. We have to minimum wage. And so I'm glad to see us increasing that amount based on our obligations. And I would like to see us move towards becoming a living wage employer in the future.
Thank you. Mayor Rabinovich.
Well, thank you very much. A couple points that I wanted to touch on. The first is with respect to the assessment base issue, and I'm pleased that this issue is here. It's one that I know various points in time it's been raised in the past with staff. I think, back over the years, we've attended various AMO conferences. There have been companies, consultants, and so on who have been promoting their services to assist municipalities in ensuring that we're getting all of the dollars that we could and should be getting from an assessment point of view, because as Mr. Chapman indicates, MPAC's role is not to be there as an advocate for us. They have a functional role to fulfill, and if we want to make sure that our needs are being represented, we either need to do that, we either pass by that opportunity, or we need to do it through staff or consulting services. I think what we'll find in doing this, excuse me, is that we're going to see additional assessment coming our way. Imposition will end up really benefiting us as opposed to hurting us. I did want to just go back to the points around Op 02 that I was making earlier as well. And I'll be clear that in finding room in a budget is not in any way suggesting that there was waste before. One needs to only look at the reference at the top of 103, where it says funding for this position has been reallocated from lower priority areas within the Community Services Department operating budget. In other words, that's what councils and that's what administration are supposed to do. They're continually supposed to look at what are the needs of a community at any given point in time, and where those needs are changing and shifting, where possible, move resources from one area and move them to another area that's more relevant for the community at a particular point in time. And so I would much rather see that than see staff coming forward with requests for additional dollars that end up impacting the ratepayer in terms of additional taxes. And so I just wanted to provide that point of clarification.
Thank you. Just before we continue, I just wanted to comment. Number one, I would agree with the comments with respect to Oppo 2, but something that just, again, cropped up from Councillor Gazzola's comments as well with Oppo 4 and the city's assessment base. I think in the environment of a fair bit of downloading of costs from other levels of government, I think it's important perhaps that staff figures out what that, I mean, I understand that the assessment is the lower tier, from Mr. Chapman's comments, the lower tier municipality's responsibility. That notwithstanding, the upper tier stands to benefit substantially from us incurring the cost. So while it might be revenue neutral for us, I would like if staff could estimate the pure revenue that the region will be generating from this. So my quick napkin math says it's probably in the range of $300,000 if we're covering 175 or so. So just, there's a term in HL when you give another team a player that you don't necessarily need anymore, they call it future considerations. I think we should get that number out there for the region for future considerations when perhaps we knock on their door one day for some additional support. Councillor Gazzola, I do have you in the queue. You have spoken twice already. You're limited to 10 minutes, but if you're going to be brief,
I wish somebody would have told me I was limited on the amount of homework I should do for this. Just a couple of points, okay? May I go? Or WISB, if I'm reading it correctly, we now have a reserve of 1.3 million, and we've had actuaries look at it currently, and we need to be at 10 million. So we're 9 million short of where we need to be. Am I reading it correctly? Okay. So then the next question is the $350,000 a year, 10 or 15 years, are the actuarial tables show that it's going to make that 10 million deficit up? Because that's, on raw figures, that's what? How many? That's between 4 and 5 million. Is interest going to double that over that period of time?
So through the chair, this WSIB gets funding through our fringe rate as well. So this is not only funding that would come in. So it's the fringe rate plus 350 top up. Essentially would get us there over 10 or 15 years.
That's all I want to make sure. Okay, but that brings me to another point, is shouldn't we be adjusting our fringe rate, minor adjustment to it, to reflect that 350 a year into our fringe rate? Because we use our fringe rate if we bill work out, if we do work for the region or other outside parties, they pay their share of the fringe rate. So the way we're handling it by just throwing the money into the reserve, we're not getting credit for that. So should we not be looking at our fringe rates to include that?
So through the chair, we will make that adjustment. We just, again, didn't want to presume direction from council. So we will make that, okay, that 350 will get entered into the fringe rate.
You didn't say it in your thing here. Okay, so that you will do that. Okay, the final question I have, and I'll make it is I'd like a little more information on this Rangers contract commitment that's adding $338,000. What is that? What is that? How does... I won't take the time now. Can we get a little more detail on how that's made up?
Through the chair, I can speak to it quickly. So as part of the 2012 odd expansion business case, one of the stipulations of that was when this debt runs out, that the Rangers benefit in portion. So because they're the ones that have actually been helping drive the revenue over the course of time. So we did the improvements to the odd in 2002 because the Rangers are there, they're drawing more people, there's increased revenue from the restaurants, the concessions, and what have you. They have not seen any of that since 2002, and then as part of the 2012 business case for the expansion that the Rangers are financing, it said that they would get a portion of those revenues coming back to them once it's paid off.
Isn't this a little bit like NAFTA? Shouldn't we be taking another look now at our total agreement?
I would argue it's in our contract with them out of the 2012 odd expansion.
Well, how long is that contract for? Is that a 50-year contract, 25-year contract, 12-year contract?
That I do not know.
Well, I'll leave that with you, just, okay?
Okay, there's no one in the queue. Sorry, I acted on having a stretch break much earlier, but we will take 2 minutes now, and I'll find out when we're retiring for caucus in a moment, okay? So 2 minute stretch.
I think I'm...
Good job, yeah. Sehr gut.
Okay, can everyone please take your seats? Okay, there was a bit of a mix-up. We will not be breaking for lunch till about 1:20, so we are going to continue along until then. Okay? Yeah, you gotta hold out for another hour. Okay, so we are on page 070, and I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Schneider to take over for now. Councillor Finn, have you in the queue?
I have a general question. When will we know about the additional investment growth, the $50,000? When would we have that information for final budget?
Absolutely. The final returned roll, I think we're receiving like within this week.
And would it be appropriate at this time for council to ask for an issue paper related to where that $50,000 could go?
Councillor Davey already directed that there is an issue paper that comes back with staff's direction or staff's opinion of where that should go.
Okay, staff's opinion, and I'd like to, can I add thing into that in terms of, I'd like to see that geared towards our active transportation request? Can we, I want to see what the cost of could ask for incremental, a part-time staff with a student, a full-time. I want to see that out financially. Was that clear in my request?
Yeah, that's how we've captured it. So I expect that it would say, here's staff's recommendation, here's something else that was there, if there's an additional cost, what that is. And then I would say, it would be clear how much additional revenue we have in assessment growth and what the additional cost of, a difference in the hiring there would be. So I would say we leave them as two separate issues, but the dollar amounts will be clear in okay. Either case.
That's good. I got to thinking about it. I wasn't sure if I was really clear on my request. Okay, thank you.
And through the chair, one of the questions that came up just before the break was about when is the Rangers debt, how long is that commitment? It is until the debt expansion is paid off. So it was issued, I believe, in 2012. It's 15-year debt, so that agreement is in place for 15 years, not in perpetuity. So.
And Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair.
Sorry.
Through the chair, just to be clear, we don't anticipate there will be a lot of money, but if council has options like the one you've referenced that you want us to explore, we will. Councillor Davey alluded to WSIB, you've alluded to active transportation, levy reduction would be the default, but if other councillors have other proposals, either today or after this meeting, if you float them by us, we can work them up and include them in the issue paper as well.
Okay. All right. So the next section we're going to talk about is new to the budget process, not new to the city, but since it has changed, we've just included slides that highlight what is planned for community grants. As Council directed through its August 28th motion, there will be some changes to the appeal process related to community grants starting in 2018. This year, a committee of staff made up of the CAO, the DCAO of Community Services, and the Executive Director to the CAO will hear all Tier 1 and Tier 2 grant appeals and make decisions on those appeals. After that appeals committee has made their decisions, Council will approve the specific amounts for each Tier 1 grant through final budget day. So that'll be part of the final budget day motion. And Council will approve the specific amounts for Tier 2 grants through a separate staff report, which comes in March. The proposed operating budget includes an overall increase of 2% to community grants. Generally, Tier 1 grants recipients will receive an increase of 1.7%, and although there may be some differences based on specific applications. By increasing Tier 1 grants by 1.7% instead of a full 2%, there's some additional funding that can be instead directed to Tier 2 grants. While it's too early in the process to determine the amount of funding that would be available for Tier 2 grants, staff believe that the amount of funding will be similar or possibly slightly higher than last year. Based on a review of the actuals over the past 5 years, staff are not recommending any change to the in-kind or travel assistance grants. I'll pause there in case there are any about the change in the grant process.
I'm not seeing anyone in the queue, so you can continue. Oh, sorry, Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
No, just in light of what Mr. Chapman just said with regards to options for additional assessment growth, I'd like to throw in a motion that be looked at for the Tier 2 grant system, because we always seem to run shy on that area. So if we add that in as an option, that would be good.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So we'll continue on with the enterprise budgets, which are the final section, although there's still a lot of ground to cover. Before speaking about any of the individual enterprises, I'd just like to focus on the chart on screen, which talks about the financial positions of each of the enterprises, as well as their ability to pay a dividend to the city. As the table shows on the slide, 4 of the city's enterprises have positive reserve balances, are projected to at the end of 2017, while 3 do not. So that means roughly half city enterprises are self-funding themselves and coming out with a positive result, whereas 3 are not. Regarding dividends, only 3 of the city's 7 enterprises are able to, and indeed do, pay a dividend to the city, and those are the top lines: parking, gas, and golf. Finally, before looking at any of the individual enterprises, I'd just like to point out to Council that we've included the enterprise overviews this year, so that gives some background information about what the individual enterprises do, the challenges they've had, the successes they've had, and how they compare with some others within the industry. The first enterprise to consider in detail is the building enterprise. Activity levels for 2016 are somewhat lower than they were in 2017, and this has caused a decline in revenues in 2017. The Building Stabilization Reserve Fund remains healthy and was planned and was the reason that permit fees were actually reduced for 2017 by 5% and are planned to be held flat for a number of years to the future. Looking to the dollar slide for building enterprises, and just a general comment on the number slides, most of my comments will focus on the 2018 budget column, so the third one from the left, or the net revenue expense box, which in this is about halfway down the slide, or the stabilization closing balance, which in this case is about 2/3 of the way down the slide. So with that background, looking at the top of the slide, the very top line, you can see that budget revenues remain high in 2018 in the building enterprise, before declining out in future years. That's because the activity is planned to be high in 2018 due to having the development charge DC, or development charge exemption, still in existence in 2018, but expiring in early 2019. I believe this will a lot of action in 2018, early 2019, and then see a decrease in activity in apartment buildings and commercial buildings in the downtown core. Expenses are fairly consistent across each year of the forecast, with modest inflationary increase. The result are ongoing deficits, so you'll see that in the net revenue expense box in the slide, that we're planning to have deficits in building over the next number of years because the stabilization reserve is healthy, and so those deficits will draw down that reserve over the next number of years before we consider any kind of permit increases. I'll pause there. If there are any questions, Mr. Sealing is available.
Okay, we have Councillor Gazzola.
I have a couple of questions on. I'm trying to understand why direct expenses are increasing by 4%. Where does the 1.7 and the 2% and all that work into this? Where's the 4% coming from?
So through the chair, I'm on page 0-76, and I don't show. Could Councillor Gazzola tell me where the fund is?
If you go from what it costs this year, $3,611,000 to $3,755,000, it's a 4% increase. What's happening?
Through the chair, thank you for that for clarification. So the reason for us with approximately $100,000 in savings is a result of one staff resignation. We had a retirement and a number of other positions that were caught in the gapping process, and the enterprise is fortunate that any money saved as a result of gapping stays in-house. Also, with the leave of absence for Tim Benedict, manager of building, he was replaced with other staff that aren't paid at the exact same rate as an experienced professional like Tim. So those are some reasons for the change from the $3.6 million to the $3.7 million.
Is Tim coming back at the beginning of next year?
Tim is coming back in the third quarter of 2018, which is good news.
So it should remain relatively the same for this year. But I won't waste time here. How about in the...
sorry, Mr. May also has a comment for you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify that when we look at the budgeted direct expenses from 2016 to 2018, not actuals, but budgeted, the increase is 8.9%.
Yeah, I know you do that. Okay. But I always find if we know what the actual experience is, it's interesting to compare to actual, because your budget may have been overstated. Therefore, let's look at actual. Anyhow, indirect expenses. So I can look at either side, budget or actual, going up 10.5%. Why 10.5% there? Is council getting more out of this? What's happening?
So the chair, thank you very much, Mr. Gazzola, for asking this. Last year, several members of council had asked questions about the building enterprise, specifically the indirect cost and the floor rate ratio that the building enterprise pays here at City Hall. Since this time last year, city staff, including finance staff, we've reviewed the floor area charges and we've updated the applicable charges. As a result of updating those assumptions, council, including Mr. Gazzola, will observe the building enterprise indirect costs have been increased. This is a good news story for the tax base while ensuring that the enterprise pays its fair share.
Okay, so let's see the other half of it.
Through the chair, the rent is paid to facilities management, so it would go up in there.
So we'll see a big change there. What was the $250,000 transfer capital? What's that?
So through the chair, that was the request to update our public portal. The building enterprise is fortunate to have a public portal, and we wanted to purchase the new one so that we could also allow other divisions, planning, engineering, fire prevention, licensing, to follow suit. So building made the original purchase. Other divisions, after the public portal is up and running, other divisions can tag along at substantially reduced cost.
And this was a decision council made during the year?
Yes, if I remember correctly, it was April of this year.
Okay. The only other question I have, and I got confused. I tried to go back to the August figures. That's the last financial statement, and I just couldn't tie anything in together. But when I looked at the figures, it said for the 4 months ended August 31st, 2017. Is that what right? Is it 4 months? Those statements, or?
Sorry, Mr. Hagee.
No, it would be 8, but that just got missed on updating because we used the April version and then
well, there were
just
a couple of
update
them like that, so I didn't know whether I had to wine with supper or not. Okay, thank you.
Okay, there are no further questions.
Next is the golf enterprise. And golf financial results for 2017 are lower than budgeted due to poor weather during the golf season. The weather this year has actually caused closures in both the Dune and Rockaway golf courses. As noted before, golf does pay a dividend to the city, and it's based on the level playing field agreement with the golf industry. You'll notice as we get to the dollar slide, the golf is expected to remain in deficit throughout the forecast. As far as its stabilization reserve goes, and we'll start making progress at eliminating that deficit once a portion of debt issued for golf courses is eliminated. Looking to the numbers, the 2018 golf budget is similar to the 2017 budget. If you look halfway down the slide, the net expense line, you'll see that over the next number of years, essentially after paying a dividend to the city, golf is treading water, just making a small surplus that pays off the interest payment for the stabilization reserve. And then as you get into 2021, 22, the financial results improve slightly as some of the debt costs for the golf expansion are paid off. Ms. Kugler is here if there are any questions about golf.
Councillor Gazzola and Councillor Fernandez in the queue. Questions on golf? Yes, Councillor Gazzola.
Now, I'm just curious as to why our gross profit goes down. I don't. We budgeted for an 18% profit. Next year, we're budgeting for 17% gross profit, but in our actual figures for this year, it dropped to 12.8. I mean, the gross profit percentage should stay relatively constant unless there's some big factor, and I'm just curious as to what the factor is here.
So I'm trying to look at the same reference that you're referring to, and
I'm looking at 078. If you look at projection, it says, and these must be pretty solid projections because over, you're showing a $346,000 gross profit as compared to one that's budgeted close to $500,000, and you're actually budgeting 502 in 2018. So what's different then? What happened during the year?
through you. So right now, what we're within our revenues, and this is on the upper line, our revenues have not been reaching what's projected. So generally, we actually offset it with the expense line. So you'll see that the 2017 budget was 492, but the expenses were 405. In the projection of 2017, you'll see that our operation was 346, but then we reduce our other expenses to 335. So the way that we actually manage our golf operation is if we have a slow season or we have impacts, then we manage it through our transfers to capital to our actual cart reserve. So that's why that difference in the first one, if you're only looking at the operation, we actually influence the overall balance to what comes to the final profit line by managing the expense side as well.
Pardon me, Mr. Hagee, to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think what's different between projection 2017 and budget 2018, the reality is projection 2017 includes a weather year, and we're not expecting that to happen again in 2018. So the gross profit between budget 2017 and budget 2018 are fairly
I won't buy that. You keep talking about a terrible year, but yet your revenues, 2.695, came very close to, okay, we're better than budget of 2.683. So why didn't we do better than 346? Your revenues were there. You didn't lose any revenue.
Sorry, so I can answer that. The revenues are projected higher. If you see that the lift in the expenses, so what we've done is how we actually track our food and beverage contract. We've put everything in the new system. So when we have a tournament that books at the facility, their booking now goes into our software, ActiveNet. So all of those revenues get posted to the revenue side, but then the expenses come down on the other, which is where so you'll see there's an increase also on the expense side. So they netted each other out.
And sorry, this is a result of the new system?
It's related to how we're reporting. In the past, we actually reported just the net of the food and beverage revenue. So if we were collecting $1,000 for food on a tournament, we would put that, just the net value, into our revenues. Now we're putting the gross $1,000 in, not the net $200 that we would have received after paying the cost of catering.
Okay, that wouldn't have been reflected in the 2017 budget if these numbers were originally put in. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Griswold. Oh, Mr. Mage, you want to comment?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I can just clarify that I believe that there are added expenses in there because of 2 major storms and the need to clean up from those storms. So there was a storm in June and a storm in May where the course had to be closed, and staff would have had to do overtime in order to clean up the storm.
This includes the damage as well.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
What did that amount to? I don't see any.
So we're still paying a couple of the invoices through that, but it's more about the loss of revenue. And if I look at what we did in revenues in 2016, the revenues were $110,000 less by closing that duration that we were closed at Dune. In addition, the other weekend that we missed where we closed both Rockaway Inn, which has not happened in the past, on that weekend the previous year we had earned $40,000. So the difference with the rain this year of the full closures of the golf course have about $150,000.
So if you closed the course, you didn't get any revenue from food, I gather, and drink, right? It's not your golf, so you didn't get any food and drink, right?
We didn't gain any food revenue. We didn't gain any green fee revenue. We didn't gain any cart revenues.
Okay, but you were closed, so you didn't still have people there working if there was closed?
We still have people operating the course. They still have to go up with the flood. They had to deal with the carp that were on the golf course. They had to put in the hazards. They had to pull equipment off that was in potential of getting pulled into the river. So there was actually maintenance on, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Griswold?
No, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, thanks, Ms. Kugler, for your response to my email regarding the flood and the warmer fall. But in your notes, it says, increase in demand for specials, unique golf experience, and loyalty programs. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how that has affected the golf ice?
So over the last couple of years, we've been trying to introduce specials. So we have one that we have out there, which is a corporate card, and we've engaged with a number of businesses, and their employees, when they present that card, actually receive a discount as they play on the golf course. And that uptake, seeing over 500 cards being used regularly. There's about 1,500 out in circulation. And then when we run our features where we have a special, when we know that we don't have a tournament operating, they're looking a little slower on the tee sheet, then we were able to sort of put out a special email to the people that have signed up for our newsletter, and then it'll trigger some people to come out and experience the course.
Okay, so that's helping bring in additional revenue and consistent revenue when you have those corporate cards?
The corporate cards definitely are helping with some consistent revenue. It gives people an opportunity that have memberships at other courses to still come and experience the golf course without having the full outlay.
Okay. And had something else written. So I don't know who it was that said they hadn't expected another significant weather like we had this year. But we should not be preparing, and how are we preparing our golf courses for these kind of significant weather changes that I think we're going to start seeing a regular pattern?
So what we're trying to do is target the areas that we know where we have an opportunity to look at. One of the things that I can tell you that has been quite successful is our growth of the junior program. And we continually see the registrations for our summer camp going to grow. We also see that our introduction to golf within the schools program has been quite well received. And we've been able to leverage that, actually gain sponsorship. This year we also had an opportunity where we had an outside agency that was interested in being part of our women's event. So they came to the table with some dollars worth items that we would have normally purchased that we didn't have to. So some of the opportunities that we offer to the community are being perceived as valuable, and people are joining that. So it's helping us offset expenses or bringing new revenues to the top.
Okay, I see where you're going with this response. I mean, what you're telling us is that we're being creative in ways of generating some new revenue. But my question was more around how are we preparing, especially the Dune golf course, for significant weather, if we can, and what can we do to prepare? Because I think we have to be prepared for more of these weather impacts.
So I would say that the design of Dune, when we did the expansion, actually did preserve some of the damage we would have seen in previous years. We do have some natural water end areas that, if it's a dry season, then they dry up and they're just dry areas on the course. But they do take a phenomenal amount of water when there is cresting, and so that's the way it was designed. We can take a closer look at it, but I believe the flooding this year had some additional variances of the volume and how rapidly it came. So I'm not sure that there's anything in particular for that one time, but from an overall flooding, I think that the design does allow for the course to take some water on, keep the water in the wetlands and allow us to get play going so that it's not within the actual playing areas. I will also say that we also looked at some of our items that were not fixed, and we're looking at ways of pulling those out earlier so that if we have some forewarning that we can move those and save some of those items.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No one else in the queue. Just a question, just with respect to the level playing field agreement, not that I want to make it more onerous for our golf enterprise, but I do notice that the dividend seems set at 75 across the projection. Is that, in terms of that agreement, should that not be adjusted going forward based on, I suppose, income taxes isn't going to be a significant contributor, but property taxes? Just looking at the dividend transfer to the city line, the $75,000.
I'll turn that one over to Ryan.
Mr. Hagee.
Through there, we've held it flat at $75,000 as the course is generating income. So essentially the income tax is nothing, and when you look down in the stabilization reserve, it's actually in a negative, so any extra dividend we would pay would just be driving the golf stabilization reserve to be worse.
Makes sense. Okay. No further questions on this, Ms. Kugler. Thank you. We are now on to the parking enterprise, which is doing quite well.
For 2017, parking is projecting a positive result at the end of the year. Revenues are higher because of short-term parking demand gains from neighboring apartment buildings that are having their garages renovated. One area of concern for the parking enterprise is its stabilization reserve, and although it's currently a positive, it's forecast to decrease after 2019 as parking takes on the full costs of cycling master plan and TDM or demand management. Looking at the number slide, you can see that projected revenues are fairly consistent across the forecast. Expenses are also pretty consistent until 2020, which is when parking on the full costs of cycling and TDM. You can see that the transfer from capital increases from about $250,000 to $700,000 between 2019 and 2020. This back results in deficits in the last 3 years of the forecast, which I've highlighted in the red box. And you can see that the stabilization reserve is also highlighted in the red box and decreased from $755,000 in 2019 way down to about $250,000 in 2022 as parking picks the cost of that programming. Mr. McCormick is here if there are any questions about the parking enterprise.
And there are 3 in the queue. Councillor.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to why our revenue is flatlined for almost 3 years in a row. Do you not see any growth there at all? Or we're not going to be changing our fees at all?
Through the chair, I assume you're meaning 2018, 2019, 2020?
Right.
Yep. Through the chair, there's a number of changes happened through those years. One is we're not anticipating all these apartments will be showing up at our door, so income drops off the page. We've got Lot 8, which is the end date. We are anticipating we'll lose that at the end of 2018, so that revenue will be gone. And we have a number of other lots like Lot A, which is 345 King Street, which was recently sold, and so that will be gone in 2018. Although we anticipate we'll pick up some of that revenue in some of our other lots, again, there's no guarantee that we'll pick up everything. So there's a number of different lots that are being juggled around and either sold or redeveloped.
Well, then shouldn't I be seeing similar reduction in general expenses then if we've got all these lots that we're selling we don't need to look after? So should they not be hand in hand?
Through the chair, we do have a very small group of parking staff, and whether you have 10 lots or 11 lots, there's still an amount of work to be done, from coin collection to snow removal, that kind of stuff. So 1 or 2 lots isn't going to make that much difference on the labor side. We still need the people here, and come the winter months, when we start seeing the snow fly and stuff like that, we'll be hopefully glad that we see them out there working away.
Yeah, but you're not going to have as much cleaning up to do in the winter. Your machinery isn't going to need as much upkeep. If I don't see the pluses going up on one side, I like to see the minuses coming down. But anyhow, subsidies. Here we are, we're still at $1.2 million in subsidies. How much of that is for the LU?
Through the chair, the WLU subsidy is about $88,000.
So where's all the rest of it? Who's the big benefactor with all that subsidy there?
Through the chair, the subsidies, my understanding is that it is used through the city, whether it was adopted by economic development or council, and we make sure that we attribute that into our revenue line, and that goes to the tax base. So we have the WLU subsidy, where the parking enterprise isn't the one, the parking enterprise does claim the revenue that it has provided in parking, and it comes out of another source.
But it's an expense that the city is incurring.
That's correct.
Is that forever?
Through the chair, the WLU subsidy is forever, as far as I understand. I don't believe there was a sunset clause in that agreement, but council would be able to better answer that.
What are the possibilities? You've had a tremendous year. What are the possibilities of increasing our rid of the city by a minor amount? Surely we can move it at least $1.9 million.
Through Chair, although we're showing great results, and my staff have done great jobs in trying to keep the expenses lower, we're looking at every revenue opportunity. One thing to be cautious about we have coming up, as Mr. Hagee had noted, that we do have the transportation demand management and cycling coming back into our expenses. Also have development charges that we are taking a look at that go beyond the 5 years that may be coming back to us. So we're going to have some down the road. And we're still not quite at the minimum thresholds. that were set by council a number of years ago, so we're still around that level.
You're going to have problems down the road, some hits, but we also have some gains, too. We never talk about the gains. It's a two-way street.
Through the chair, we've got, obviously, we're looking at all opportunities. Recently, starting January 1st, we have a new deal that's coming out at Civic District Garage, which are built into these numbers. So there are gains. And as I said, we're looking at different revenue opportunities every day and trying to keep those revenues as high as we can.
Well, if we gave the city a little bigger dividend, parking would still survive handily, would they not?
Okay, Mr. Reed?
In addition to the two items that Mr. McCormick has outlined around the cycling TDM and the DC charge, when we get to capital budget, we also have the need for a new parking garage down the road. So the whole parking strategy is to redevelop slots to create a more vibrant downtown economy, but we need to find some spaces for that, and that's where the new parking structure is identified in the 10-year forecast. So I'd be hesitant to start cutting from the dividend from the parking enterprise now until you see the full picture with the capital budget as well.
Whoa, I didn't want to hear that. No, more parking garages. You're telling me we're having problems filling? We have. And we've got the big new LRT coming rumbling down the road, and we're talking about new parking garages?
Councillor Gould, I share that exact concern, as I'm sure several members of committee do, but I think we should probably save that discussion for capital budget. Okay, Mayor Vuganovich.
Thank you. I'm just on the monthly parking, and I know, Paul, you went through some of the changes in terms of lots, the ones that we're losing, and so on, and we're maintaining the revenue stream. I'm wondering what our sort of average utilization, though, is across our system. So are we on? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yep. Through the chair. I'll speak to the garages first. In October, we were at 82%, and I'm just talking monthly parkers at this point in time. So of our entire inventory in our garages, 82% of those are leased. The average for 2017 was about 75%. For the surface...
So just so I understand that clearly, we have technically set aside 82% capacity. We've reached about 75, so we still have room to grow about 7%?
Just for clarification, so right now in October, the last time we do these number counts every month, so in October we were at 82%. Go back through 2017, we were average 75. So there was a little uptick with some of the apartments and stuff like that. The surface in October was 57%, and on average 53%. Again, we're just talking monthlies. Keep in mind, we still have hourlies coming and going, which is also filling up the garages. I'm just looking at a percentage based on that.
So by an industry standard, I would presume those are pretty good numbers, particularly on the monthlies in the garages and the lots?
Through the chair, we always try to aim for about 85% as our occupancy. Why 85 and not 100? That 15% allows for people to come into the garage, they're driving around, circulating, trying to find a spot, so we don't want to use up everything. But I always try to use up as much as I can and then try to get the revenue as high as we can.
No, for sure. Okay, I think that covers off my questions. I certainly in the capital conversation around future garages, I think there's things we can be looking at, and we'll save that for next week's conversation.
Very good. Councillor Fernandez.
Yes. Mr. McCormick, just a quick question, because I ask it every year. How's our Charles and Benton parking lot? What's our percentage of monthly parkers and our filling of that garage?
Through the chair, in October, Charles and Benton was at 57%. Again, we're just monthly, so I'm not looking at the dailies that come and go all the time, which is doing fairly well. And that's been helped out by, there's an apartment building over on Church Street, so they've been using that last little bit. It's still, we're still looking at different opportunities at the building now. We've got a few other I'd say poker's in the fire, and still working on that one.
So our other three main parking garages would be Duke Street, the Civic Center, and the City Hall, right?
And the market as well.
Oh, the market, sorry. What percentage of would they be full? Are they higher than 57?
The market's at 56. The rest are higher. City Hall Civic District has done very well. They're both over 100% at this point in time. City Hall has been always one of those anomalies that we seem to fill more and more. We have a lot of staff as well as other businesses, and we seem to be able to complete more monthly agreements at City Hall, and also at Civic District, because we have the region as well. So we've been pushing that one as well.
Okay, did you say 100%?
Civic District right now is about 104, and on average about 96% throughout 2017.
Okay.
And City Hall is about 114%.
Okay, all right. And I'm glad to see, Charles and Benton is slowly creeping up. I think that's critical, but at least it does show that we still have space available, as do we at the market. Now, I recognize that both of those are more, I guess, let's say easterly. Would that be correct? Is it the right direction? As opposed to westerly, where I do want to state now, and I will state it again during Capital, another parking structure at any time in the next few years is not acceptable for me. We have to, Mr. Reedman, you were talking about cycling mass and getting those dedicated those lanes. We've got LRT coming on board. Until we see some success in those, we should not be investing any money until we get every one of these parking garages completely full.
Okay, I'll permit that. I think we need to. We'll discuss it next week. I think we need to see some strong rationale, but we can have a discussion next week. No comments or questions. I'm really happy with the budget we see before us. I assume when we hit 104% and 114%, that's probably two smart cars stacked in the same parking spot. Is that okay, we'll move along. On to Gasworks.
Gas is presented in three separate sections, kind of showing the three separate companies for gas. The first we're going to talk about is delivery. Delivery revenues are down because of the warmer than normal weather that we've had in 2017, and expenses are higher due to the T3 union contract. Those were things that were discussed with Council previously. Net revenue is still expected to be positive for 2017, which means that the gas delivery section is earning money and coming out of its deficit on the stabilization reserve side of things. Gas delivery is the part of the utility that can pay a dividend to the city. We've already discussed that somewhat this morning. Just as we look at the numbers, just to remind Council that you have already approved the gas rates that will be in effect for the majority in 2018, and the numbers that you see on the slide reflect the rates that have already been approved. For 2018, gas delivery is expecting net revenue of $1.1 million. You'll see that in the net revenue expense box halfway down the slide, third column over, and that helps move the reserve balance closer to its minimum target. Future years in the forecast see modest improvements and essentially are somewhat break even. To the discussion that we had earlier this morning about gas dividend, it's shown here on the slide, so it's just above that net revenue expense box. You'll see a line that says dividend transfer to the city. For 2017, it's just over $15 million, and you'll see that that's been inflated for 2018, consistent with what we've done in the past. There are a whole host of gas people here, so I'll look to the chair. Do you want to deal with delivery first and then transportation second and cap and trade third, or I can present all of it and we can...
How about we do all of it except, let's pause at cap and trade.
Okay, so I'll do supply transportation.
Please.
So supply transportation are the flow-through rates that we charge our customers, and are not meant to generate a profit and cannot be used to pay a dividend to the city. As we're setting gas rates, Council approved combining both of these. So previously, you would have seen supply in one section, transportation in another. You'll still see on the number that they are there, but you'll see that transportation essentially goes away as it's been consolidated into the supply company on the numbers slide. Gas supply is budgeting a $3.6 million net expense or decrease. And you'll see that toward, I would say, the top third of the slide. Based on reduced rates, as noted in the previous, this will bring the stabilization reserve down to be within its minimum and maximum targets. Taking direction from the chair, we'll pause there for questions on supply.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Can you give me some kind of an indication of what our sales being, our revenue for delivery has been to the end of October? I'm just wondering how accurate your projections are. So what were our actual sales to the end of October? We know that now, right?
These statements are actual to September. These statements are actual to September. So
when you show actual revenues of 36,041, is that going to change by the end of the year?
So through the chair, these numbers are actual to September, so they will projected. They may change basically.
Well, that's what I'm asking here. I wondered if you could tell me what our actual figures are to the end of October. And we can build on that to see, how close are we for the year.
Mr. Hagee?
Sure. Just to clarify, so what Mr. Prasad is saying is true. These reflect actuals up to the end of September, and then it is budget for October, November, December. So the number you see here is the projected figure for the whole year. We've reflected all actuals up to the end of September and just used budget for October, November, December.
So we really don't know what our figures are for this year then.
That's why they're projected, not actuals.
Well, I question that. I'm just curious as to where they are. So has November been colder than last year or warmer?
So through the chair, it has been warmer. I do have indications of an actual to October that takes revenue down to 35 million, 35.9 million.
And you say November has been warmer than last year?
Well, gas consumption has been down.
Okay, because I get the feeling November's been colder than last year.
Maybe people are keeping their houses colder. Ms. Fletcher.
Through the chair, while these figures reflect to expenses and revenues to the end of September, that was intended. We brought our gas report to council in October for ratification and rate settings. The 2018 rates went into effect in November. So certainly can update our numbers as we go forward, but that is one of the reasons why we were reflecting to the end of September.
I'm going to ask this question. I've asked it before, but why is our gross profit going down from where we budgeted at 61% down to 56%? What's happening? What's caused that?
So through the chair, that gross profit went down primarily because of increased union gas fees that we've paid over the last year.
But when did those increased fees come into play? I thought that contract started on August the 1st or changed on August the 1st. So
that contract was in effect from this year. It was covered under Report INS 17021. And the costs are primarily attributed to expansion and renewal of Union Gas capital infrastructure. So those costs were taken to the Ontario Energy Board and they were found to be prudent.
And they started on January the 1st of 2017?
Correct.
What are those costs for?
So therefore, infrastructure. So this was effective on our renewal of our T3 contract, which was actually, I believe it was in April or May.
The last I read it, the T3 contract came into play August the 1st or something.
It could have been August the 1st. I don't have the exact information or exact date in front of me.
And I'm struggling to understand if you could just explain what the capital nature is. How does their capital affect?
So through the chair, we use Union Gas's transmission infrastructure to bring gas to the city.
Is that in our delivery costs or in our transportation costs?
That is for our delivery costs.
So what is in our transportation costs then?
So through the chair, transportation is actually to bring the gas commodity to Ontario.
I'm confused. The gas commodity.
Yeah, so those would be the molecules. So we would purchase gas either in Western Canada or in the Marcellus area of the United States, and to bring that gas to Ontario is a gas transportation cost.
Where does that gas, when you bring that, where does that gas go? How does you buy the gas out west or down south, and you pay through transportation charges to get the gas here? So how does Union get in the act?
So through the chair, we pay to get the gas to the Ontario border, and it goes to our obligated delivery points on behalf of Union, and then it goes into storage. So net of storage, whatever gets into the city, net of that goes into storage.
All right. Okay, my time up, or I've got questions?
Yeah, it's been up for a little bit. I just thought like
Pardon?
It's been up for a bit, but yeah.
Well, then I'll begin again because I have questions on the supply.
Okay, very good. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yeah, I just have two questions in regards to the supply. So on page 084, the other, I didn't see, unless I missed it, what that is related to, the 1.5 million.
Through the chair, previously transportation did not have an inventory component to it. So this now that transportation and supply is combined with the supply, we're adding the transportation, so we're moving that to the inventory, and that's what Mr. Hagee presented in the patient.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. Is there any worth then in changing that to say inventory, if that's what it is, other than using the word there?
Mr. Hagee?
Chair, we could change it for final budget day. It's essentially a one-time expense, but we don't intend on having that line in the future.
Oh, okay, then don't worry about that. And I wasn't saying to change it I was thinking it was an ongoing thing. Okay, that's fine. No, don't bother changing anything. And then just with the supply revenues, is that purely just as a result of the rate increase, going from 22 million to almost 29 million?
Through the chair, it is for 2018. They're the 28,900. That is for the cost of the commodity to supply the commodity and transportation.
Right, and so that increase is just purely based on like the revenues coming in is on the increase of the actual fee or charging customers.
Yeah, as well as the estimated volume of gas to come due to weather.
Okay. That's all my thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griswold.
Yeah, just going back to that, it's also because we're now in 2018, you're including transportation in here. That whole $6 million, that's not just, that $6 million is not all due to a price increase. It's because you're including transportation in here. Right? If you look at the bottom, 084, there are no transportation figures for 2018.
Yes.
They're included up above.
That is correct.
And that's part of the big jump from 22 million to 28 million.
Mr. Hagee?
Yeah. So I'm just going to confirm that totally correct. So essentially, a better comparison would be to have the 22 million plus the 7 million and compare that from 2017 to 2018.
Sorry, one thing to add, that if you're to the gas supply revenues of 28 million, that $6 million is not included in that number. That's purely rate revenue.
Where then is the money for transportation?
So transportation and supply, but it's rate revenue as a result of bringing in the stabilization from the transportation.
No, I didn't say it was. It's just, you don't have the bottom part. You've combined transportation and supply.
Correct.
Yeah, so what revenue you would have brought in are now combined. We not increase supply fees by that amount. We reduce supply fees. Help me here. Come on. Okay.
Of clarification, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Well, just going along that line, I'm having a hard time understanding because then we have another $4 million or $3 million increase than in 2019. So I'm just trying to understand just purely the revenue line. So sorry to jump in, but
Ms. Fletcher?
Through the chair, I think following along the lines of Councillor Gazzola's comments, if we had left transportation at the bottom of the page, you would have seen revenue lines from 2018 to 2022. Those revenue lines are now reflected up in the supply lines. So I believe that's what Councillor Gazzola was trying to point out. It could have been left separated. They are now combined.
Mr. Haggie to add?
Sure. So that's true for if the change from 2017 to 2018. The increase from 2018 to 2019 is by rate. So halfway down the slide, you'll see that the rate is 13.5 cents goes to 15.5 cents. And then if you look to the right of that, it's 15.5 cents throughout the whole year. So the change for 18 to 19 is rate.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Fletcher? Are you good? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Gazzola, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm lost where I am. I'm not quite clear on that other, the 1,576,000 that you're adding in there. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? Had to come from somewhere.
Okay. Sorry. So through the chair, that the 1.5 million that you're referencing is a result of closing out the gas transportation reserve and the inclusion of that transportation as part of inventory going forward for the supply program.
Okay, so I should be able to then look at the gas transportation and see 1,576 coming out of there. But I don't see that. I see 923,000 coming out of there or going in there. I'm not.
Through the chair, the other line is two items: the creation of inventory, and the closing out of the stabilization reserve. So, if it was only closing out the stabilization reserve, you would be able to track the $923,000 from transportation up to supply. So the other amount is the creation of the inventory, about $2.5 million, and that was a prepaid expense on the gas utilities balance sheet, not showing it wasn't in the income statement.
So I can't follow that through any statement as to where it's come from, or?
It's not here. It would be part of the gas utility financial statements.
All right, I'm a little confused, but okay, I'll look further into that. Now, the one of the questions I had asked when you brought in the new rates, and as to why we couldn't do a little better with giving the people a little bit better break. So I look here at the end of the year. We're sitting there with $6.6 million in our reserve, and you know that's double the maximum benchmark. Could we not have done a little better for people, customers?
So through the chair, we had budgeted to reduce. We budgeted to under collect revenues in 2017 in order to reduce that stabilization balance. Because of the warmer than average year, it ended up growing that stabilization balance because we had an increase, a reduction in cost of gas supply. And so to exasperate that problem, upon combining the gas transportation program into that supply program, we ended up with a net reserve position of, or projected reserve position of $6.5 million. However, had we had any lower, it reduces the effectiveness of our stabilization reserve and could potentially lead to rate instability in the future. The entire purpose of the stabilization system is to mitigate rate spikes in the future. So staff has done a prudent job in trying to manage this, and this year is a one-time exception that it's exceeding the maximum benchmark. But as you can see, for the future years, it's brought down, and that's been achieved through rate reductions.
It's actually exceeded a couple of years in a row. Okay, it's not just this year, and that's why. Now, next year, if we're buying, it all depends on what the gas price is on the spot market compared to what we're collecting from our customers, right? So, I mean, I felt well. That's neither here nor there. It's okay.
Councillor Gazzola, you far exceeded your...
My time's up. Yeah. Okay, my time's up. I'll ring in again or I'll go home.
Okay. Thank you. I think our lunch is ready, but we'll whip through, we'll just finish off gas, so we'll do the cap and trade, and we'll move along.
Can I ask just a quick question before we leave that page? Just your interest income projected is showing the same as budgeted. That's not right? You've got a lot more in the pot all year than you had expected to have. You had expected to run that pot down to 2.9 million, but it's actually ending up at 6.6 million. So with rising interest rates, you're going to have made more than the 121 plan.
You're correct. We'll have it updated for the final budget day. As far as cap and trade go, I just have some cursory comments to make. It began this year, January 1st, 2017. The rate that's been approved by council through the rate report is nearly 3.9 cents per cubic meter. The projection that we have on screen shows, again, looking at the net rev expense box, that we're essentially breaking even in most years for cap and trade purpose. If there are any questions, the gas utility people are happy to answer. We've discussed this numerous times. I don't see anyone in the queue on cap and trade. Okay, no one in the queue, so we will, Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, Councillor Gazzola had asked a question this morning about the rate decrease. We have an answer for that, and so Mr. Prasad, I believe, can speak to that now.
Thank you, I would appreciate that.
So, Councillor Gazzola has provided a difference in calculation perspective in terms of how we look at a year-over-year range. So Kitchener Utilities' comparison for gas rates has always been a annualized and calendarized rate-to-rate comparison. This has been industry standard practice, and it's something that we've always followed. Looking at this year-over-year increase would result a 2% rate-to-rate comparison. So just to clarify that approach.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, it was your question. I'll give you...
Pardon? He's absolutely right. Year after year, year over year. But we this year implemented rates November the 1st. So I'm looking at the next 12 months and comparing it to the previous 12 months. That's how you normally compare if there's an increase. By changing our implementation date, we get into this problem. We've gone from a calendar year to a fiscal year. And by doing that, you eliminate that amount. That's That's not magic. That's the way it is. So you can't go, because our rates here now, you show them in there, are going to change again on November the 1st, 18. So we can't go, we have to go from what's the next 12 months after our rate change compared to our previous 12 months before the rate change. And if you do that, there is no change. Not a bad thing, but it's not a 2% decrease. That's...
Okay, so different calendar years. Okay, that concludes the portion, the morning portion. We do have to go to special counsel for our caucus item. Mayor Rabinovich.
Okay, I'll call the special council meeting to order. Motion to go in camera for the one item, moved by Councillor Fernandez, seconded by Councillor Schneider. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Motion to recess, Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Davey. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Scott.
Thinking, how much time was required for the caucus item? I don't recall. 45 minutes? Yeah, so we'll be back in 45 minutes, so that will be, yeah, 45 for lunch and caucus. Okay, so we'll be back at 2:15.